Good evening, and welcome to the Wakefield Town Council meeting of Monday, May 25th, 2024. I call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is attendance. We have all 7 counselors here in attendance in person this evening. Good to see everyone. Let's move on to item number 4, which is public engagement. We have a number of individuals who've signed up for either written comments or verbal comments. Sherry, do we have first person on the list, Kimberly Rivera, on the Zoom?
No, I do not see Kimberly.
Okay. What about Anne Marie Moretti?
No.
Okay. All right. I will just read through. It looks like the rest of the comments we had were written, so I will just read through these for the record. Ms. Rivera did send us written comment regarding the billing process for the Department of Water and Sewer is clearly a town-wide issue. Many residents are not receiving their bills and only receiving delinquent notices with late fees attached to them. With brought to the town's attention, they are giving responses like too bad and the blame is being shifted to the post office. It isn't a post office issue when all other mail and town-related bills are delivered on time. This needs to be addressed by the town so that residents aren't burdened by late fees and inconvenient payment options. The next written comment was Valerie Wakefield, who also asked that, related to water and sewer billing, asked that there be an option for auto pay. Lee Concessi wrote to say water sewer bill does not arrive on time in the mail, no online banking available, late fees are outrageous. Anne Marie Moretti wrote billing from the department, again, I'm assuming water and sewer, and the late fees and interest that is being charged to the homeowners. And then finally, Manuel Martins wrote, water sewer bills are not being mailed on time or not at all. We did not receive January bill like other town residents. And that is what we had for pre-submitted comments. Sherry, do we have anyone else online for public comment?
Yes, we do. Somebody by the name of Julie, and she's coming over now.
Okay. And while we're waiting, is there anyone in studio who is here for public comment? All right. Seeing none, then we'll go online. If you, just as a reminder, please identify yourself with your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you wouldn't mind going ahead.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Julie Scott. I live at 4 Central Street. I'm a member of the Master Plan Advisory Group that started work over 2 years ago. MAPC was hired to work with us, and we gathered as a group for about a year and a half. The group has not heard anything since last September about the status of the first draft of the plan. That means that Wakefield is a town working without a master plan. That means that Wakefield is a town working without a master plan because the most recent plan is outdated. It was started in 2004, and plans according to the state last for 10 to 15 years. That would either have brought us to 2014 or 2019. Our document only benefits developers as we do not have an updated roadmap for our town's future or its vision. Another state-required document, our housing production plan, was first valid in February of 2015, and that lasted for 5 years, but we did have an option to renew for another 5 years, bringing us to 2025. Easily, we could have started to renew the document with the state in August or September of 2019, long before its February 2020 expiration date, but more importantly, long before any hint of a worldwide pandemic and long before the MBTA 3A Communities Act was even born. We could have renewed this roadmap for our future, but we did not. An updated housing production plan matters. Next door in the town of Reading, their plan clearly states a huge success. As of December 2022, Reading has achieved their 10% SHI threshold. According to MAPC, housing production plans are plans that help municipalities better understand local housing needs and demand, development constraints and opportunities, but most importantly, it helps them plan ahead. Our constant lack of planning ahead continues to not benefit the taxpayer. MAPC states a strong reason to adopt an HPP is because communities must plan ahead to quickly meet the state mandate requiring that 10% of total year-round housing units be affordable by setting a numeric goal for annual housing production. We don't do that. Wakefield has no valid HPP plan and no updated master plan. I ask all of you, but especially the 4 of you current town council members who were serving in 2019, to please push for a new housing production plan, especially in light of the MBTA 3A Communities Act, so that we can plan ahead for the huge impact that this state mandate will have on our community for decades to come. In closing, I ask that all tonight support the Affordable Housing Trust portion of tonight's ARPA funding action. This trust has no source of funding, which makes it a perfect recipient of ARPA funding. What the Affordable Housing Trust means for our community is vitally important to the heart and soul of our community. The second article in the Wakefield Affordable Housing Trust states that the purpose of the trust shall be to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in the town for the benefit of low and moderate income households and for the funding of community housing. The quality of life and the character of the community of Wakefield are important to all. Show the hundreds who have shown up at meetings and public hearings about the MBTA 3A Communities Act that you not only hear the concerns, but you are acting on behalf of their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, Sherry?
No, no one else.
All right.
But we may have a great segue, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Is Samantha Elliott on, Sherry?
Yes.
Can you bring her over? Samantha Elliott is our,
Yeah.
like this was planned, right? But it wasn't. Samantha Elliott is our new senior planner. That's my term. She comes to us with experience in Cambridge. I always get this wrong. It's either Mansfield or Maynard, as well as Florida. Jacksonville, Florida has some great ideas, is on board. If you would introduce yourself in a couple of minutes, and I think those are her 2 priorities, the HPP and the master plan. So it's a good segue, actually.
Excellent.
Mr. Bjorn.
Well,
Thank
Samantha,
you,
we'd love
Sam.
to hear from you.
Hello, it's nice to meet all of you. Yes, I was on the planning board in Maynard and worked for the city of Cambridge and then the city of Jacksonville prior to becoming the senior planner here at Wakefield. And yes, I am starting to work on the housing production plan and the master plan with Aaron and trying to get those items updated and moving forward.
Great.
So we're thrilled to have her on board. I know that Erin is particularly thrilled. And we look forward to seeing some great things. She's already been part of our meetings every week with me and more so certainly with Erin and others, and has some great ideas about going forward on both plans, including that she has already been corresponding with MAPC, particularly on the master plan, and we have some maybe more directions to go there. So welcome aboard, Samantha. We're grateful to have you.
Excellent. No,
Thank you.
just
I'm very
speaking on behalf of the council, I think we're all very excited to have you on board. There is a lot of work to do, I think, as you've known in your first couple of weeks, and to have someone with your background and your talent working on that, I think we're fortunate in Wakefield, and so look forward, I think, to all meeting you in person and connecting on some of these important projects.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to wearing all the different hats.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for the indulgence.
No, it was well timed and a great segue, so
Every now and then.
no complaints. With that, though, we will segue to a completely different topic. Let's move on to item number 5, the fiscal year 2025 budgets. Mr. Gill, if you wouldn't mind joining us and kicking us off with Veteran Services.
Not yet. Veterans first.
Paul, have a seat here.
Great. And Sherry, do we have anyone online from the Finance Committee for tonight's budgets?
John Ravenel, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, we do have Dawn on for group health.
Okay,
Not for veterans.
got it. Mr. Gill, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Town Council members. First budget tonight is the Veteran Service budget. This budget here, I talked with Dave back in December and early January, went over this budget with him, made sure he was comfortable with it. There has been a couple instances where they're looking for a little bit more help in the office, which is something Steve's been addressing with Melrose, where we collaborate with Melrose for these services. And I think we have a good plan going forward with that. But a quick overall on the budget, we are requesting a decrease to this budget for fiscal '25 of $16,213. This breaks down a small increase under personal services, $338, which is a step increase for part-time admin help in the office. I will point out that the clerical union contract hasn't been settled yet, so there will be additional funds coming in for that. Under contracted services, there is an increase of $3,349, which breaks down under the professional services line item. The increase was $3,079, which is the money we sent to Melrose to be part of the intermunicipal agreement between the three communities, which are Melrose, Wakefield, and Saugus. We also increased printing and binding $200, postage $250, and we reduced the telephone line item $180, all based on both current and prior year usage. Small increase under materials and supplies, $100 for office supplies. We did reduce the recipient line item $20,000 due to decrease in usage. We did decrease this last year from 170,000 to 110. So far, through 6 months, it was at $38,000. Annualize it, it's just under 80,000. So we're looking to reduce it from 110,000 to 90,000 in fiscal '25. I will point out also that the town does receive reimbursement from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts up to 75% of those recipient expenditures. So I think in fiscal '24, we're expecting a little over $40,000, and in fiscal '25, almost $70,000. The total budget request for fiscal '25 is $178,300.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cancieri, would you like to add some thoughts?
Good evening, Councilor Chines and members of the Town Council and Mr. Mayo. I'm Paul Cancelleri, the Chair of the Wakefield Veterans Advisory Board. I'm accompanied this evening with David Mangan, our VSO, and we're seeking a budgetary change that supports increasing the Veteran Service Officer hours from a part-time status to a full-time role. The role of the Veteran Service Officer can be found in CMR 108, Chapter 12, or Section 12. Just to kind of sum it up, the VSO administrates public assistance benefits under Mass General Law, Chapter 115. The Veterans Agent shall also assist veterans in obtaining VA compensation and pension. The Veterans Agent shall furnish information, advice, and assistance to veterans and their dependents to enable them to procure the benefits to which they are or may be entitled relative to employment, vocational, or other educational opportunities, hospitalization, medical care, and other veterans' benefits. The Veteran Agent shall acquire and have on hand copies of current booklets and other printed matter pertaining to statutory rights of veterans provided under the state and federal laws. The VSO also works in close coordination with existing federal agencies established for the aid of veterans, and they shall enlist the support of hospitals within their respective communities or districts for carrying out their mission. In July of 2024, the Veterans Advisory Board unanimously voted in support of expanding the current part-time VSO role to a full-time position. After much discussion, the Veterans Advisory Board concluded that the VSO part-time schedule hinders the ability to scale. This has an impact on the velocity of the role to deliver quality services to veterans and their families. As the chair of the Veterans Advisory Board, I realize this adjustment may take some time. However, as the town of Wakefield grows, so should the role of the Veteran Service Officer to support the growth of our community. The Wakefield VSO serves as a part-time employee of the city of Melrose, or like we call the district. The district consists of 3 part-time, 18-hour-a-week veteran service officers. One's in Melrose, one in Wakefield, and one in Saugus. Each town contributes 33%, as Kevin said, of the total compensation package to fund the role of the director. Velocity is the rate at which the veteran service officer can deliver services and benefits over a specific period of time to veterans and their families. CMR 108, Section 12, states that notwithstanding any provision of the law to the contrary, any city or town having a population of over 12,000 and having a part-time veterans agent or part-time director of veterans services shall, at the end of the term of such agent or director, whether by resignation, retirement, or otherwise, either join a veteran service district in a manner provided by Mass General Law, Chapter 15, Section 10, or appoint a full-time veterans agent or director of veteran services. These provisions shall not apply to any city or town so long as the incumbent of the office of part-time veterans agent or part-time director of veteran services holds such an office by reappointment. I ask the council this evening to acknowledge the recommendation of the Veterans Advisory Board and take the necessary steps to pursue a budget decision that delivers the services of a full-time veterans officer independent of the district overseen by the city of Melrose. Subject to your questions, David and I are prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cancieri. Mr. Mayo, I was wondering if you could kind of speak to the structure of the arrangement with Melrose and Saugus and how that plays into staffing.
So we are completely in compliance with Mass General laws because Massachusetts actually approved our district many years ago. It might be 10 years ago now, but I forget exactly when we did that. So I met with, so we are in compliance there. So I met with Dave and Paul, thank you very much, on January 31st, and Kevin, I think the three of us sat there. And I really, drilled down to talk about what was going on because this arrangement had worked very well for many years. Karen Burke, who is now our excellent Council on Aging Director, she was the Veterans District Officer for the district. And I also consulted her. She's very much, knows what's going on there. And it worked very well when she was there, and we had, I think maybe Dave, you worked with her. Actually, yes, I did. It worked very well with her. So it does, this past year, fiscal year, has been a tough one because we have not received the help and assistance from, and the timing in Wakefield that we should have from the Veteran Service Officer, Regional Officer, because I think there was a retirement or someone left in Melrose, and the dedication hadn't been here. So when I met with Dave and Paul, Dave told me and Kevin that 18 hours was tough, and he really needed 20 to 25 hours a week to do the job, and that's getting no help. And I don't think at that point there had been anybody from Melrose coming over to help. Maybe he came to a coffee once or something like that. So I had a couple of meetings with the mayor of Melrose, the new mayor, and I think it was in your packet. She listened, and they have committed to have the veteran service agent be in Wakefield at least one day a week, starting now, and that'll be Thursdays from 8 to 4. Tuesdays from 8 to 4, excuse me, I had the wrong day. Tuesdays from 8 to 4 in Wakefield. So that gives us 8 more hours a week, or let's say 7 with lunch, which would bring us up over to 25 hours. And then when Melrose hires their veteran service officer for Melrose, we would get an additional half day a week there. So I think when all that happens, we'll be back to where we were before. We'll be able to service the veterans and everything that needs to happen. But we will be monitoring it. The benefits to Wakefield, the financial benefits, by having a part-time person in Wakefield and a part-time person in Saugus, and I'm happy that the same offer was made to Saugus for 1 day a week too. So I guess I did my job for them. Do I send the bill over to Crabtree to get paid to help them over there? But in any event, we don't have health insurance costs, which, let's say that family plan, we don't know. I know Dave doesn't need it, but the position might at some point. It also reduces costs for other areas, Medicare, OPEB evaluation and things like that. But most importantly, it will provide the service for the veterans that they need. And I asked Dave to give me his hours from the beginning of the year, and he was great. Thank you very much. You were very organized and got it to me right away. And, there are, a number of days where he is putting in more than his 18 hours, a number of weeks, and a few that luckily he didn't, which is great. And he should be given comp time for all that money. But I think actually be very easy to cover this with the Veteran Services Office in Wakefield from Melrose. So I will be we'll be monitoring that, and I'll ask Dave to let me know if they miss any days. And we had a great success before with Karen and her predecessor over there, and I think we can do that again, and we'll monitor it because the other, are we going to get out of the agreement with Melrose? I mean, that's something that this board is going to have to decide and go it alone. There's certain designations that are needed. I don't think anybody here has it, but they can be gotten if necessary. So I think that with the commitment from Mayor Grigoratis, I'm very comfortable that we can keep forward with as we have been doing and monitoring it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Dabrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayo and Kevin and Paul and Dave. I think I take a different position on this, and being liaison to the Veterans Advisory Board, I've heard what they have to say, and I feel like we're in a different position than we were perhaps even a few years ago relative to the provision of services. One, we're a town that keeps growing. Two, we're talking about things like the PACT Act at the federal level. We're talking about the Valor Act 1 and 2 at the state level. We're talking about changes in Medicaid. The PACT Act, for example, that's allowing for more claims now, things like Agent Orange, burn pits, those sorts of things for surviving spouses. It's a different landscape. And to be clear, we're getting the potential services from Melrose of a director. And that's different than the VSO. The VSOs, as I understand it, VSOs communicate with one another. They're really kind of like the direct contact with our veterans. They work, if you don't know a particular answer, you get it from your counterparts. The director serves a different function. That's really kind of oversight, hiring of VSOs, and kind of oversight of operations within a district. There had been a lot of talk, and we're paying about 30 grand or thereabouts for that. There had been a lot of talk through the Veterans Advisory Board about, does it make more sense for Wakefield to go it alone? And I think that's something we should really seriously consider. As I understand it, we need to get some permissions from Boston, basically, but which could be gotten. Right, that's more perfunctory. But it then allows us it allows us to direct those resources we're currently paying to Melrose towards this position. And I think it localizes it in a way that I think would ultimately be of benefit to our own veterans within Wakefield, in a way that this multi-community approach doesn't necessarily serve the same function. And a lot of the data points that we're looking at, and Steve, I appreciate all the work you've done with this, a lot of the data points we're looking at are looking at what we're providing in terms of services currently. We're not looking at what we could be providing in terms of services. And I think that's the rub for me. I think there's a lot more opportunity here that's not being realized because of the restraints that we've created for ourselves as a community. I think we have, and you both could probably speak to this, I think we have more veterans that are either coming into the community or we hope to bring into our community. And I think the messaging is really important here too, showing that we are strongly supporting our veterans at the local level. And I think the director kind of filling in to add more hours is not what we need. I think we need to think about a revamping of this and going forward. So I have heard what the Veterans Advisory Board has to say. I agree with it for a number of reasons. I've had many conversations on this. And with all due respect to Melrose and to Saugus, this is not something that I think we're deriving the kind of benefit from collaboratively that we could derive if we were doing it individually. So for that, I would strongly encourage us to explore going in a different direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair Chines. Thank you, Dave and Paul, and Kevin, I see you every 2 weeks. First question is for you, Dave. Do you agree, this is on the recipients line of the budget, do you agree with the reduction from $110,000 down to $90,000? The previous year it was 170 and last year it was reduced to 110. Do you concur with reducing it from 110 to 90?
Well, after speaking with Kevin Gill a few times on the phone, we felt that it was going to be a comfortable reduction. Chapter 115s have gone down. We're at 11 now. There was an untimely demise of one of the veterans this year. Yet I think, as Steve had reiterated in the past, that if we needed to get more, we could. And that's not going to be a problem, but I'm comfortable with that currently, Ed.
Okay, thank you. And as Steve alluded to during his comments, you provided him input of your work hours for
Yes.
this part of the year, January through, I think it was March 22nd. And you
Yes.
averaged somewhere around 21.2 hours a week.
At least, yeah.
Make sure you take your compensatory time. I know as a veteran,
It's-
you tend not to do those things.
It's
We tend to-
difficult.
Yeah, I know. I know how we are, but you need to make sure you take
I
that time.
understand, I understand.
So I have a few questions for Steve as well as the group of gentlemen sitting up there. What services or assistance have we received the first half of this fiscal year from the district VSO director for the $30,000 that we currently paid?
Minimal.
How many times has she come to Wakefield to provide services to any veteran?
She came to a coffee, because I happened to see her there. Dave can answer if she's come in and done any of the other things, but my guess is none.
None.
Yeah.
And when we paid the $30,000 a year, do we have a reasonable expectation that she is supposed to come over here and
Yes.
render services to veterans?
Yes, that's what.
She has been accessible by phone and email on a regular basis, though. That has happened, but as far as the results of any actual services towards any of the Wakefield veterans, and because of what I do, she hasn't really had to, but it has caused a significant burden on the position here.
Well, we pay 33% of her salary. She works, 36 hours, 38 hours a week? So she should be providing service to us 1/3 of that time, and she has not been rendering those services for us. But Steve, we are indicating that eventually we're going to get 30 hours of support for veterans here in Wakefield because we're going to get 18 from our VSO and another 12 from the district VSO director. When she starts coming over here, 12
Right,
hours.
when they
Once they
hire
fill the void they have over there with the VSO Melrose position. So the 30,000 and change that we pay to the director and the $28,000 and change that we pay to our VSO is about $58,000 a year for 30 hours of support. From a cost-effective standpoint, how is $58,000 a year for 30-hour support differ from having a full-time position, which would be an increased salary, also increased hours? But then you've got the Medicare and those things
And
to
you'd have
put
the
in.
benefits on top.
Right,
of
so
that, right.
is that substantially more in cost to the town of having a full-time
It
position?
certainly could be, if it were a family plan, the position were a family plan. You don't know. No, I can't say it definitely would be.
Okay. Does anybody here know what it would even take to terminate the contract and how quickly something like that would take?
We would have to give them notice. I forget whether it's 60 or 90 days off the top of my head.
So if we funded the budget this year with your recommendation, we could still pursue trying to make it a full-time position we could see how this works with having the director come over here and then see whether it's cost beneficial for us. My emphasis on cost beneficial is service to veterans, not how much it costs the taxpayers. I'll just be candid. We have a responsibility to take care of our veterans. and the district VSO director has clearly let us down over the last year. I would insist on getting a quarterly report from you on how often the director from the VSO, district VSO director comes over here, how many veterans she has seen, and what kind of services she provides. And the last question I have for you, Dave, is, correct me if I'm wrong, does the district, and Paul, you too, because I know you're the VSO over in Saugus, does the district VSO director have more specialized training than a VSO position has? To get the director position, do you have to have more formalized training as far as helping applicants for disability compensation and things of that nature?
Yes, I believe it does to enhance more because it's a certification for a district director of a veteran services. One thing I want to put in right now, though, is let you know, Roe is coming over tomorrow at 8 a.m. to 12 noon, and I've given her some work to do. And I'm going to keep a log of all the work assignments I give her and follow up on finding out what direction they go in. So she's receptive to that. Without her current VSO position over there, she's kind of, I know she said to me she's doing everything she possibly can, and I think I can understand that. I would like to have more input from her when I can, but I haven't gotten that, as you said, over the last 6 months or 4 months anyhow, or the 2 years that she's been there. So we need to get that, and she's going to work on it. She's already addressed that as well.
But she's your boss in a chain of command, right?
Right.
So you're the one, Steve, more responsible for tracking the work that she's done. You can't have the subordinate going tracking the work of his
Well, I would
supervisor.
certainly ask Dave to let me know.
Yeah, well, that's what we worked. I said to Steve, in my own right, I said to Steve that I will give him all the assignments that,
Yeah.
will be laid out and the results of those assignments.
Yeah, I never asked an admiral to let me know what his work
No, I
was. Okay, so are you amenable to having this arrangement take place
Yes.
for this year? And then we can explore, the town council can take the responsibility to work with Steve to explore the possibility, how procedurally you would terminate a contract, not necessarily to do it, because we
Right.
want to see how this works.
Right.
But then if we face this issue in the future, we'll know the process by which we can terminate it if we deem that appropriate. Or we can continue with this program if we find that this is beneficial towards veterans. Is that satisfactory for you?
Yes, I think it's fine. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring up, as the vanguard to the opportunities for the veterans to seek and get their benefits established. I don't know how or why that this position can't go to 19 and a half hours a week rather than just 18. Is there a cutoff at 20 hours, you say?
I think it's 19. It's 20? Up to 20.
Okay, so could 20 be the ongoing amount? Is that 2 hours? I can get a lot done in a week.
That's a question for
Yeah,
Steve.
I'll work that out with them.
That would be great,
Okay.
Steve.
Yep.
I have, for example, in the numbers department, we have an average of 41 new claims in the three, I'm writing here. And each 41 claim that came in this year alone, they require 3 sessions. They don't just come in, and for 45 minutes I take all the claims, the documents, and shovel them in and get them out. There's an average of 156 days from what I'm doing 18 hours a week. But there are 530 documents in the year 2023 that had to be submitted. And each of these documents go from 2 pages to 8 pages each. And having the system of Vetrospect is good. It's very good, and it's definitive. But what I give to the VA has to go into Boston or Rhode Island, then it goes off to Janesville, Wisconsin. And if there's a problem, it comes back to the county building or Providence, then it goes back to me. A lot of times it's done a lot quicker now than it ever was done. When I first came on board almost 5 years ago, they did a lot of stuff scanning with UPC codes and everything else. It was a nightmare. They've really enhanced it tremendously. We've also increased from the PACT Act, from the HERO Act that's about to come about here, and the terror program, the toxic exposure, and plus all the advertisements of Camp Lejeune and the redundancy of a lot of that stuff that comes in. It's not easy, let's put it that way. I have a passion for what I do, so it does make it a little bit easier on the whole thing because I've learned a lot along the road. And was able to help Paul when he came in as well. I average about 5 to 10 emails a day and sometimes on the weekends, I check my voicemails on the weekends, and then I save them on the number 2 on the phone, because I'll come in Monday, like today, and I'll have 10 to 15 voicemails. And I keep my logs. I've given Steve the logs I've been keeping, and somewhere in the vicinity of 703 logs already for this year. So it comes down, and last year we had 92 veteran claims that went in. We had 10 deceased veterans, 27 since 2021. And that requires a lot also for the spouse, for the grave markers, for the burial benefits, for the reimbursements of funeral expenses. And then there's the food bank every month. There's the coffee socials. It's 18 hours just doesn't do it, guys and gals. Just doesn't do it. And I mean, I'm doing everything I can to keep it floating right. I put enough Band-Aids on this boat to make it float. But it can be done. But I think at this point in time, where our population since the inception of this, at 12,000, we've gone to 27,000 in the town. The veteran population has increased. The demands of the veterans are becoming more and more obvious. We're getting a lot of the spouses who didn't know that they had benefits because of the marketing we're doing as well, which needed to be done. I've had people call and say that they didn't know they could get this. Wow, I could get this? You know, I can get my health care because I'm a World War II veteran. Now it's 100% no matter what. Or access into the Chelsea Soldiers Home for a 94-year-old father. Or if that veteran passes away, the spouse needing help and support from aid and attendance. Or even the Chapter 115 when they become indigent because they're running out of money. That's it.
Okay.
If I can, I would say one thing, because we did mention about, and thank you for being willing to work with us, Dave, I appreciate it. When a veteran comes in, it's been our philosophy for years, forever, or it's been my philosophy since I've been here and before. No veteran is turned away, number one. We have basically 3 bites at the apple if more veterans come in. One would be in the fall town meeting to increase the recipient's line item with the supplement. 2 would be in the spring town meeting to increase the recipient's line. And/or the last one would be reserve fund transfer. And we have done that over the years, not in recent time, but in the past, we've had many a reserve fund transfer to help out veterans. So I want that to be very clear, because I think last time we talked about it last year, there was some different, that didn't make the press. There's no veteran that gets turned away, is the number one thing that I want to make, as long as we can help it. So that has happened. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Mr. McLean.
Just a couple of quick questions for whoever can answer them. It does seem, though, that if we ultimately decided to split from Melrose, we would still need a director function. Is that correct, Steve?
We would need a director of services in town. It would probably be one person with the designation.
And might that be Mr. Mangan, or would you'd need to get a separate certification?
No, I could guess. I'm actually certified now.
You are
I'm actually
certified,
certified now
Okay.
once a year to get the certified. But you wouldn't. I could take the position with a little bit more training on munis and things of that nature for warrants.
Okay. The only other question I had was, do we keep annual numbers of veterans so that we know veterans in town? It sounds like we do.
Yeah,
Exactly
The
how many
retrospect program has that available. Yes.
Right. And can you give us an idea as to how many increases we've had, like in the last couple of years? We went from 800 veterans to 850 or 400
I can get that for you. I currently don't have it. Well, I have some numbers here. Hold on.
No, I don't want you to do anything you're not ready to do.
I can get it. We have had an increase.
We have.
We have, yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say 15% each year. 10%, 15%. Sure.
Each
in
year.
the 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Dabrowski?
I'd say I continue to not feel comfortable with the idea of reducing the recipient's line item. I know that we have dropped that dramatically. I think also, though, budgeting represents our values and our priorities. And if we end up having it at the pre-reduction level and we don't use it, then so be it. But I think that it sends a message. And I understand that veterans won't be turned away, but I also think we have to send the message to veterans that they're a priority in our community. And I don't think that consistently reducing that budget down to around 170. Now we're talking about, 5 digits. That to me, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Councilman McLean?
Although the subject matter experts have indicated that they're comfortable with that number, I agree with you relative to budgeting. It's $20,000. I wouldn't have a problem, leaving it at 110 instead of the 90 if I've got my numbers correctly from memory.
Which is down from 170.
Understood.
Yeah.
Right, but there was a statement last year that we weren't providing services. It sounds like we are, we are outreaching. I think you had mentioned that a year ago. It sounds like the outreaching is being done. It sounds like we're reaching veterans. If we're not, please tell us.
We are. We're reaching veterans.
Okay.
We have at the
Yeah.
coffee social, we have as many as 45 to 50 attending
Right.
at the coffee socials.
Right.
Exponentially, the word is getting out.
Right.
And even to other towns, which like you said, I don't turn them away, but I try.
Right. Which, to your point, could indicate that there will be potentially an expansion as we do the outreach. So I'm good either way.
Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair Chines. Just briefly, I came here tonight not knowing how I felt about the 90,000 reduction from 110 to 90. The reason I will support the reduction from 110 to 90 is because you, Dave, indicated me with my first question that you're comfortable with that. And that's the reason I will vote that way. Now, if I had my druthers, which I'm not going to do, I would reduce the budget that we pay to the VSO director from 30,000 to 15,000 because we got nothing the first half of this year, and keep this 90,000 at 105. But I know that I can't do that. But I am comfortable with the reduction based on your statement to me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Seeing none, I will take a motion to approve the Veteran Services Department budget as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Any further comment? One observation that I want to make, and I do, Mr. Mayo, I think the sense of the council is, we absolutely should keep an eye on this and evaluate, whether this is the right approach moving forward. One thing that I don't want to lose sight of is knowing that Melrose is without a VSO now, and that is part of the reason that the director's time has been scarce for Wakefield. It does highlight the fact that when you have a regional service organization with multiple people, you can cover for different vacancies. And so one of the concerns, and this is only one issue and part of the broader evaluation, but one of the concerns that I would have about leaving the consortium is that if we have one person, even if they're full-time, if we do have a vacancy and we don't have that filled at some point, we have to figure out how to make up for that. It's a little bit easier if you can kind of, borrow hours from other individuals. And so, again, that's not the only consideration, and that, being part of that consortium may or may not mean more hours or fewer hours. I think that's a separate question from whether we're still kind of on board with Melrose and Saugus, but it's just a piece that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of because, Dave, you do a great job, but if you hit the lottery tomorrow,
Tonight.
Tonight, and, we have a vacancy, right now we know that there's some way of backfilling that between, the director and Melrose and other resources. I would be concerned that if we were going it alone, that we would lose some of that capacity, and that's something we just need to be planful about.
If I win the lottery tonight, I promise I'll stay on board for at least 3 days.
That should totally cover us.
No, I will stay for the amount of weeks. I've got almost 5 years in, and I put 1 week per month, so I'll stick around and train the next person eloquently.
Well, we appreciate that. Any other further discussion on the motion?
Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Just 24-year career as an infantry officer. These are my medical records.
Yeah.
Not awards, decorations, or anything else. But this is the foundation of a claim that a VSO like David goes through that yielded 20% back in 2004 for disability, just to kind of give you a visual.
No, absolutely no. And I think it really is a good visual that underscores both the importance of the work that, both of you do in Wakefield and Saugus, but also the time and the effort that has to go into it. So appreciate your efforts.
The
And I know our
satisfaction
residents
that's
do too.
gained, I believe also, to a veteran service officer from the results of a successful claim is overwhelmingly wonderful. It's like hitting a water. Yeah. To be honest with you, it's a very rewarding feeling. It truly is.
Any further comments on the motion? Yep.
So I'd actually like to make a motion to amend. I think this would be the appropriate time for that, to restore the recipient's amount to the 110 versus the 90.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion to amend?
I would, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I would say that if you look at things historically, and then if you consider the fact that we have a, so I'm just looking at that, we have a 10 to 15% increase. I'm looking, for instance, at, I don't know what year this is, the actual expend in fiscal '23. Where were we at? That was $95,000 for recipients. You know, and so we're talking about a budget of $90,000, which is actually $5,000, more than $5,000 less than what the actual spend was in fiscal '23, when we have more veterans that we're servicing. So it doesn't make any sense to me that we would be budgeting at an amount lower than 2 fiscal years ago.
It's relative to chapter 115 though, I think. So 115 clientele, they're down to 11 right now.
Yeah.
12, they have no one came on board. At
Right.
one point, there was 26.
But that wasn't 2 years ago.
No, it was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
right, exactly. So,
It's cost effective.
yeah, and so but you added like one or two 115s into the mix, and suddenly those numbers are very different.
Right.
So I don't see any harm in budgeting at the 110 and allowing for us the flexibility. And again, I think it sends the message to our veterans too.
Council
Can
Butt?
I just ask a clarifying question, Kevin? So, like, if it's 110, we get 70% of that 110 back, or we got,
What we actually
what we
send out
pay
the
is
door.
110?
Right, so
Yeah.
if we budget 110, we spend 90 on the recipients, we'd get 75% of the 90
So yeah, of that number, we get 75%.
of what we actually put out the door.
Right.
Yeah,
But we have to have it up front and available. That's the.
yeah, but we've never, and Steve and Kevin have never, we wouldn't not get you the money if we needed, and Steve explained that. So I think it's fine going up to 110. If we don't use it, it comes back to us. But it's there, it sends a good message. I would like, I think what Councilor Vincent said was really helpful. I think when we have these inter-municipality agencies, like, I just think there needs to be more HR oversight, kind of, Steve, coming from you. And I love that you talked to the HR person in Melrose, but I think,
Mayor.
you know.
Mayor.
Oh, Mayor,
Mayor.
but then an email came
Yes,
from the HR
yes.
person. Yeah, so with Mayor Gregoritis and, you know, the other partners that we have, and I think to continue kind of those conversations, I think a quarterly update is really great. I will say that Rose spoke on the Women's Day panel, and, you know, I think because they're understaffed, she's working 20 hours a day as well. I think there just is a lot of need everywhere, and so I want to be mindful of that. I think putting on pressure on Mayor Jen of getting that position filled in their town, so then the director can do their job, would be really helpful. But I think updates would be really great. And then Dave, I know you said you had it, but I would love the increase of numbers. If you could get us the precise increase, that, you know, I know you're saying 15%, but I'd love to see just over the last couple of years, what are the increased numbers?
That retrospect system has that in it, I believe.
So if you could get that to us, get it to Sherry, she'll get it to us, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
Councilor Smith Galvin?
When you refer to the recipients as, is it, you call it the 115, what does that mean
Yes,
exactly?
Chapter 115 is a state-run program that provides, based on a formula of indigencies from the percentage below the federal poverty level, including their savings, their pensions and everything. If they fall within a certain amount, dollar amount, then they qualify for that.
Okay.
And it's all allotted to each person differently. Some are on medical only. If they're over 65, we provide the return of their Medicare Part B, for an example, or Part D, or some of their Medigap bills they pay, and their prescriptions, or eyeglasses once a year, once every 2 years. It's all based on their percentage in the poverty level,
Okay.
200%.
And you said that has not been a group that's growing quickly. While we do have more veterans coming in, that
Right,
that
right.
category is not.
Well, we
growing.
have more conflicts. We have Syria, we had Jordan, we had Afghanistan,
Right.
we have Iraq, and they're very busy. These guys, they want to come in as much as they can, and you know, a lot of the spouses of deceased veterans, they're coming in too, wanting their benefits, their entitlement to. So
But they're not accessing this recipients line.
no, they're not.
Okay.
They're not. That's where if that's increased and the 115 is decreased.
Right, okay, that's very
Basically,
helpful.
what's-
Makes sense.
And the other federal benefits, they don't run through
Yes.
this budget like that. That's why it's
Yep.
confusing.
I understand.
It's the service.
Any other comments on the motion? Councillor Vincent?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Chines. The only thing I wanted to clarify, like, for instance, what Paul's talking about, the disability compensation, which I have the same thing. A VSO would help a veteran prepare that application, but then that decision's made at the federal level and the compensation is made at the federal level. The only other thing I wanted to ask you, Steve, is the district VSO, the year prior, she didn't work over here either in Wakefield. So this has been not just this half of this year, that's the year prior as well, when they did have a VSO in Melrose. So even when they had a VSO in Melrose, the director was not providing services over here in Wakefield the year prior to this current fiscal year. So it's been a longer-term trend than just the first half of this fiscal year.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Oh, Councillor Dennehy.
I just want to say is I just feel a little bit uncomfortable that we're paying 33% and we're not getting our services from that, and it's gone on for 2 years. So I understand what Councillor Chine says. I think you make a really good point, but I think there's a cost benefit analysis, and it sounds like we're not getting our money's worth, and I don't know if that's really for me as a town councilor that's loyal to Wakefield. That's my responsibility is for Wakefield. I don't really feel comfortable with that arrangement. It's been 2 years, and so that's where I am.
So just to clarify my comment, I mean, any intermunicipal agreement, regardless if it's this or anything else, I mean, I think that there is a compliance component to it that we have to be mindful of. And, you know, Mr. Mayo, I know you've had some conversations with the mayor of Melrose.
Made it very clear your point.
Yeah, but I think that still, to me, sort of speaks to the fact that one of the things I would want to consider as we look at the go-forward evaluation is what are our contingency plans? It's hard to be a department of one.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have a lot of redundancy, and you know, the worst possible scenario from my perspective is if we had trouble staffing a position and could not provide support to veterans. I think that would be sort of a catastrophic failure on our part. So that's again why I suggest that as a consideration, but it certainly is by no means the only consideration, and I think the contract compliance piece of it is a really important one as well. Councilor Dombrowski.
I think I'd like to see something in place for, I'll say, calendar Q2, fiscal year Q4. So from April through end of June, and actually measure, you know, what kind of benefit we're deriving, if you will. Because I'd like to, by mid this year, make a determination as to whether we should pursue that direction so that we can, you know, pursue the funding at fall town meeting with that. Because I think the points are well taken. We have expended a good amount of resources and not derived the benefit for our veterans. And when I think about veterans more holistically too, if they're down to VSO in Melrose, and then, you know, so that means that they're also not, those veterans are not getting the services. So it sounds like a lose-lose. But I would like to really see us in earnest evaluate this and be ready to, you know, take a step if necessary with whatever requisite period of notice we have to give, so that we could potentially fund this at fall town meeting. Because I go back to the Veterans Advisory Board on that, understanding what you're saying, and I appreciate and respect your opinion too, Councilor Chines, on that, on the issue of a department of one. But we kind of are a department of one right now, candidly, because we haven't been receiving the support that we're paying for. I don't feel comfortable with that.
Any further comments on the motion to amend? All right, seeing none, we will take a motion on the, a vote on the motion to amend the budget for recipient services from 90,000 to 110,000. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We are back to the main motion as amended to approve the Veterans Services budget as proposed with the change to $110,000 for the recipients line. Is there further discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Mangan, Mr. Pansieri, for joining us tonight, for participating in the discussion, and for all the great work that you both do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right, Mr. Gill, we have a much less exciting budget coming up next. Let's move to budget number 40, Medicare.
Medicare budget, we're recommending an increase of $68,864 over the current fiscal year. This budget is used to pay the town's portion of the Medicare tax. This is a salary-based tax for employees hired after 1986 with the tax rate of 1.45%. Total budget request is $1,030,195. Looking at the budget this year, we're probably going to need a small reserve fund transfer at the end of the year in the vicinity of $10,000.
Mr. Mayo, any comments?
No, that's pretty straightforward.
Any comments?
Purely a function of payroll.
Any comments or questions from the council? All right, seeing none, I will take a motion to approve the Medicare budget as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 5C, budget 46, group health insurance. Welcome, Ms. Forziati.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next to me, I have Amy Forziati, HR Director. For the group insurance budget for fiscal '25, we're recommending an increase of $204,144. There's good and bad news on this budget. Bad news is, on average, health insurance costs for fiscal '25 going up approximately 10% over the current fiscal year. The good news is we are expecting to return approximately $1 million from the current year's budget, turning it back to the general fund at the end of this fiscal year. We also reduced the OPEB line item that's part of this budget by $400,000 in fiscal '25. We did a new valuation, and we're able to capture some of the good years that we've had with that trust fund. The tax levy portion of this budget is being increased to $163,033. The increase, the enterprise funds total $41,111. We did increase personal services. The increase $64,707, which includes contractual and negotiated increases in one new position, HR coordinator. We also did increase the enterprise offset for salaries by $20,000 from $25,000 to $45,000 in fiscal '25. This budget also funds $1 million to the town's OPEB trust fund. Current balance in that trust fund now is almost $32 million. The total budget request for fiscal '25, $15,917,161, with $13,455,094 coming from the tax levy, $505,336 coming from the water enterprise, $328,242 from the sewer enterprise, and $1,628,489 from the municipal light department.
Thank you. Ms. Forziati, you have a presentation as well?
I do. Thank you. Okay. So Kevin mentioned about OPEB, and I wanted to show a little story here about OPEB. In 2012, we were not with the GIC. We signed on with the GIC of January 1 of 2012.
And if you look at the budget there, it's 14.1 million, as opposed to 2013, when that budget was based on being a member of the GIC, where the town saved nearly $4 million. You know, definitely recognition to Steve Mayo and my former mentor, Laurie Riley, for having the foresight to do that. It's been the lion's share of the savings in the health plans. There are additional areas where Karen Doucette is the payroll and benefits coordinator, can affect change, and I'll show you a couple of those. But if you look down the line, the FY over FY change without OPEB. So the first year, 2012, there's no contributions. Is the budget from our former carrier. If you look down the line to the 751, that's the increase we've asked for in budget for premiums. If you pop over to the next column, you'll see that over those years, the savings have allowed us to contribute $20 million to OPEB. And all the way to the right, our budget changes over those years have only increased $1.7 million. So in essence, it cost you $1.7 million to save $20 million to OPEB. And if you add on the amount of returns that the group insurance department has made to the town each year, that number is less than zero. So this, I talked about some ways that we can affect the budget in our department. If you look at the blue area, those are the Unicare products. They are the most cost-effective, most benefit-rich plans that we offer. And this pie chart was really kind of striking to me because this is the work that we do. We build relationships with the employees, we educate them on what their plan choices are, and in the end, when we do that, we are able to help employees make good plan choices that save both them and the town money. When you look at the green slice, not too many people are going to change from there. It's our lowest cost plan. It looks different than the other plans. There's not a lot of wiggle room to make any conversions there. But the red slices are the areas where we still feel like we have wiggle room to maybe educate more staff into maybe right sizing plans for them. So this shows, Kevin said the good news and bad news. So this is all of our employees, right? So you have that big blue chunk, which is all of those who are enrolled, 66%. We have an opt-out program where we can also affect change. That's only 7%. But the most concerning part is the 27% that is unenrolled. That represents 247 benefit eligible people who are not currently taking our benefits. And you'll see in the budget, there's an additional page that talks about exposure. Of the 247 plans, our average cost at $19,808 puts us at a $14.8 million exposure should everybody flood onto the insurance all at once. Will that happen? No. But
4.8.
what?
You said 14.8. 4.8. 4.8, please.
4.8. It's still a lot of money.
We don't want Steve contributing
I've
to our
already-
healthcare costs right now.
So in order to kind of combat this, I go back to that opt-out program. Our PEC, our Public Employees Committee, negotiates the benefits for the town with Steve, myself, and Karen. We have an opt-out plan, which means if you drop our insurance, we will pay you to stay off the insurance. An individual is $2,100 for the year. That's increased this year, and $4,200, which pales in comparison to the 19.8. with the retirees. Nearly all of them are enrolled in our insurance. With the budget you see here, you won't see very many additional subscribers, and that's how Kevin has asked us to kind of come down on the budget to match last year. With new employees coming on and employees retiring, we just add 2 employees to the insurance. Nobody goes away. So the budget this year is bare. We have 25 plans that 25 plans that we allowed for. So there's good news and bad news, right? So the good news is we've saved a ton of money over the past 14 years, 13 years. We hope to come in on budget this year if everything goes as planned, but just need you to know what that exposure is, because nobody wants to go back to town meeting and ask for more money because they've gone over budget.
So some couple things that are important to note is that, number one, in the GIC, and a lot of people think there's only one plan in the GIC, and I guess for the public, the GIC is the Group Insurance Commission, which is the state of Massachusetts plan that I think 2012, 2013, communities were allowed to get into that plan. And we jumped on this. Wakefield was great about jumping on it, I think, right when we could to get in there. And that was because we were in a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan through Maya, through the MMA, and we were hemorrhaging every year. Rates were skyrocketing through the roof every year. We got them late in the cycle. I mean, so we couldn't plan. We get the GIC, we just got the rates a couple of weeks ago, but that's a lot better than getting these a couple of weeks from now when we're going to an early town meeting. So we made the decision to go in, and that took a lot of negotiations with the unions. It used to be that we needed, I believe it was a 2/3 vote, and the state legislature allowed the town to go into it. It dropped it to 50 plus 1%, 50% plus 0.1. So we got in after a vote of the unions, because each union had a weighted average to go in. So the success story is that what we did is we decided to fund OPEB. And although we've put 20 million into OPEB because of good numbers, we're up around, what would you say, 30 million now? 32 million now. We will be fully funded, and I know that Council McLean loves these numbers. We'll be fully funded in 2040 if everything goes according to plan, and that's only 15 years. That's not too bad.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. They said they were going to throw a party. They're going to invite us when this happens. So this has been a great success story for the town of Wakefield. It does take a lot of work, and Amy and Karen have done a great job in meeting really one-on-one with employees and retirees, because within this group of plans, your doctor's on the same plan. You know, your benefits are basically the same on the same plan. Why would you as an employee want to pay more per month? And why would we as an employer want to pay more per month? So it's a win-win for both sides. The problem is that, as Amy said, we've had a lot of success over the years, but there's not too many people to move anymore to the less expensive plans. So the other thing that we're looking at is that there are a lot of people, particularly in the past year, we have hired a lot of people, not new FTEs, but replacement FTEs, and they are young. They are 24, 25. At some point, and they're still on their parents' plan under the Affordable Care Act. At some point, these people are going to go on our plan. So that's something we want to keep in mind and think about. Over the last few years, we've returned this budget has returned $1 million a year. I talk about it in November town meeting, and I always say, next year it's not going to happen. I think this year, this November, when I say that, I am going to be telling the truth, because unless something really extraordinary happens, we'd be looking, if everything panned out, a very rosy estimate would be 300,000 or so might be returned. But it all depends on who goes on plans and who doesn't. So it's been a good job. The 10% increase in GIC is an anomaly. It hasn't had a big jump like that. in many years. I think next year, I'm praying next year won't be an increase like that. I think they'll do more with plan design next year. I'm frankly a little bit surprised that they increased by 10% this year because guess what? The state's paying that too. So they need to do a better job, they being the GIC, to buy insurance at a cheaper price from the carriers as well. So I'm hoping that they will do that. So it's a clean budget. It is going to it's going to help us with our overall expenses this year, and hard work done by everybody involved. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we have John Ravenel from the FinCom
Yes.
on. Mr. Ravenel, if you have any comments to share from Finance Committee.
Can't see him. Oh, there he is.
Oh, John, you muted.
He always does that.
So I think Steve and the town staff have pretty much covered everything that we reviewed at the group insurance subcommittee of the finance committee. The town staff's done an excellent job of managing the town's insurance program, returning $1 million to free cash in 2024. This budget, as they've said, represents a 1.2% increase year over year, while addressing the 10% premium increase costs, by reducing the amount of OPEB contribution by $400,000, and through managing plan selection and the opt-out incentive for the town employees. As they've mentioned, this budget does hold some risk of volatility should more unenrolled town employees choose our group health insurance than the 25 new plans that have been factored in for FY25. This will become clearer during plan enrollment. And then, as they've said, our most recent OPEB valuation has us achieving full funding in 2040, even with this FY25 reduction. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor McLean.
Couple quick questions. Is the landscape of the unenrolled, is that the younger folks, or is it, because it looks like a pretty good piece of pie, or is it more broad than that?
It is more broad than that.
Just people choosing not to insure?
I believe there are a lot of employees who, maybe are on their spouse's plans and, just take a part-time job here, that is benefit eligible, a 30-hour job or something to supplement whatever's going on at home, but they just don't change until they find out about the benefits. And then they come and ask questions.
And they would not be eligible for the opt-out?
They're eligible for the opt-out only when they drop the plan. So if you
Okay.
have enrolled, we want to incentivize you to maybe drop if you can go on a spouse's plan and get alternate coverage.
And Kevin, personal services, was that up some 30%? Did I see that?
That's correct, that we were adding a new full-time position there.
Okay, and could you explain that, Steve, the addition of the full-time position?
We feel that the department does need more help. They're dealing with multiple plans and employees. I think that there is in the Govinder, if you have it, a job description, and we felt that we have a staff that's very, very lean and needed to provide more support to employees, help with all of these issues, including maybe building some succession at the end of the day, because we do have an employee that's long-term in there, I think 27, 28 years. Karen.
I do have a couple of comments about this. We have been able to achieve economies because of the relationships we build with the employees and the retirees. They come to us, they listen to us, they trust us. But we are doing everything from soup to nuts. So if somebody hires a recreation staff member for the summer, I'm running the quarry in addition to creating your budget or negotiating benefits with the PEC. I feel like we've maybe not been able to service our employees as well as we have in years past. Last year we had the greeter, was really helpful. It was our administrative support, and now without that, we're just really, really feeling it, and we feel like we're not connecting, especially since everything has gone virtual. We want to connect. The other part of that is our Munis software. We were forced to upgrade in the fall. It's a new software. We have a lot of new staff, and I know I am seasoned now because a lot of people will come to me and ask me how to do something in Munis. The new Munis looks different. It doesn't have the same instructions, but Karen and myself have been doing this for years, so they do come to us. So we're pulled in a lot of different directions. And then, like Steve said, with succession planning, our Munis was set up in 2010 and hasn't really had any attention since then. And there's been a lot of jerry-rigging along the way to make it work. And should anybody from the outside come in, they would not be able to use the system the way it is. So it is time to automate it, use it properly so that anybody could come in and run a payroll or any other HR function in our software.
I'm just trying to figure out how that relates to the new position.
Oh, so the new position would take a lot of the administrative
The admin,
pieces up.
okay.
So, you know, I'm maybe not running a query, I'm interacting with an employee.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you. That's all I have, Steve.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilor Dabrowski?
I think one of the confusions I have, Mr. Gill, maybe you can answer this for me, is why are we grouping group health insurance with HR? I understand that HR administers the health plans, but to me, I think HR gets tucked in to group health insurance, and it feels like it should really be two separate budgets entirely. Like, is there a reason that we do it as we do? I get that it's the personal services of insurance, but HR is more than just health insurance.
Right, but HR does oversee the health insurance too, so it's basically all encompassing. It was, I hate to say it, that's the way it's been set up, and it's been running that way for, the last 20 years.
I guess the reason I ask is because I had occasion to watch your subcommittee, and Mr. Ravenel, it struck me that FinCom, the subcommittee, was very much focused on OPEB and the numbers, and I totally agree with you, Ms. Forziati, that Unicare should be promoted because it's Blue Cross Blue Shield. People don't realize that, so it's a marketing piece. And
Actually,
I think
isn't Blue Cross Blue Shield. Sorry, just to.
It's from the.
It's from.
But it's not Blue Cross Blue Shield.
It's not Blue Cross. It is part of the parent company.
It's part of the parent company of.
Anthem, which has changed.
It's a different
and changed.
I'm going on whatever the subcommittee talked about. So, okay, if that's not correct, my apologies. I think it should be marketed differently because it sounds like it's a good plan. But at no point were we, during that meeting, did the idea of this new position even come up in the subcommittee discussion, which struck me as odd because when FinCom is coming to us, the subcommittee, I assume that you're going through and making recommendations to us. But I watched the whole meeting, and there was never even a discussion about this new position. So I can't imagine that FinCom would have a position on it, right?
Yeah, well, we haven't actually voted on this or made a position on the overall budget. Normally, we do that with the full finance committee. And I think the subcommittee was primarily focused on, the majority of the cost in this budget, which is the health insurance costs, and that, we probably did not fully evaluate the position, but, given the size of the town and the responsibilities in managing this program, and the success that the staff has had in managing this program, that we felt comfortable that it was warranted.
Well, the position never came up. There was never a discussion at the subcommittee about this new position at any point. Mr. Gill, you mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, but then after that, there was no discussion, good, bad, or indifferent. And I guess that's why, I think it kind of like underscores my point of when we have group health insurance tucked in with, or I should say HR tucked in with group health insurance, obviously, group health insurance, it's much bigger numbers, there's a lot more to be discussed. And so inherently, that's where the focus is going to lie when you have that kind of presentation. And I think it comes at the sacrifice of being able to look more critically at HR, which I understand why it has been done like this, but I can also see the de-emphasis that the department budget ends up getting as a result of it. And I think it was demonstrated in the subcommittee. I don't feel comfortable with most FTEs. I think it's pretty well known. I recall when we were looking at that senior planner position, Counselor Danahy, how many hoops had to be jumped through to the idea of adding an FTE to town hall. It was like a big deal. This budget cycle across all of our departments, to my understanding, we may have one addition of a DPW employee, which I see as a direct services benefit to taxpayers in the sense that it's someone that's going to be on the ground and able to be doing things. Whereas this is more of a back of house function. So I don't see the value add for the taxpayer in the same way. And I know we just got the description about an hour and a half ago on GoVend, an hour and a half before the meeting on GoVenda. I looked at it quickly, but I have real hesitation about the idea of adding an FTE when I'm not convinced that it's necessary to do that. And I don't think the value add there is going to be for the taxpayer relative to that too. It's 65,000 plus benefits. We're probably talking what, $85,000, $90,000 all in, thereabouts for that. Yeah, for that position. I think about Councilor Dennehy, how many months did we spend talking about that that planner? How many meetings did that come up because there's a new FTE and we're talking about sustainable budgeting? And I don't, so I don't support the addition of that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair Chines. Where I find this a little bit confusing is, and I understand the point you brought up about the Director of Strategic Planning, but I also look at this year, and this year we had the Council on Aging come in and want to go from part-time to full-time, and we had a robust discussion, and we looked at a lot of paperwork, documentation, supporting documentation before we voted to approve that. Then we had the Conservation Committee come in, and they wanted to go from part-time to full-time, and once again, there was a robust discussion with a lot of people in the room and a lot of information provided to us before the meeting, and we ended up voting no. And then tonight we had the VSO come in and articulate reasons to go from part-time to full-time, and we've decided to do further evaluation in terms of seeing whether things will work with Melrose. And we have to look at the process by which we can implement that if we want to do it. So these part-time to full-time positions had a lot more robust discussion and a lot more supporting documentation. And as you indicated, Councilman Borowski, it was like a couple hours ago that we got the job description, and I haven't had a chance to really look through it. So I'm not saying that it's necessary or not as far as having the FTE. I just don't feel comfortable that I have enough information tonight to make an informed decision as to whether I support it or not. I just need more time to evaluate and more documentation to evaluate.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilor Danahy?
I would just agree that it is, I think, having the group health insurance with human resources kind of draws attention away from the human resource, the budget for the office. So that just would be a suggestion, is that be separated.
out.
Councilor McLean?
I just wanted to make one thing clear to you. This discussion is not a reflection on you
No.
or your department.
I am the HR department.
This discussion is because many of us work full-time. We spend significant hours working unpaid, part-time. We get GoVenda on a Friday. And if the town administrator is now telling me that there's something in my GoVenda that came in a couple of hours ago, I was on town email today. I was vacillating between work and town. Can't do that every day. So it's nothing on you. It's just that we're getting too little information, too darn late. Sorry.
Thank you. So just given the sense of the discussion, Mr. Mayo, I might ask if we can kind of bring this back to our next meeting so that if counselors do have specific questions with regard to the new position.
But that's the last one.
Well, well, I was going to mention
I'm
that.
just
So that I
laughing, 'cause
do
it's
want
got
to be
town
clear, though.
meetings.
We do have a number of budgets to go through at the next meeting. But I think that this is something that, I think you're hearing some, some question around that I think requires some appropriate due diligence. I think for me personally, Ms. Forziati, first of all, I do think that an HR department of 2 that does all HR and all benefits for a town our size is, something we should seriously look at. But I think it would be helpful just to get an understanding of, like what is the amount of time you're spending on some of these more administrative elements where, we have an experienced, reasonably, well compensated employee relative to an administrative position doing things like Corey checks. For me, that would be one thing that I'd want to see some more detail on. And so I might ask, unless there is objection from the council, that we, table this budget until our next meeting. And I would encourage my colleagues to reach out with specific questions that might help us inform
We'll
this
try to get you
discussion.
something too. And they also do all payroll.
Yep.
Which is another big town in the schools.
No, and so I do think, again, speaking just for myself, I think that this is a position that we need to consider seriously because this is a lot of work for a community, an employer of this size to have 2 FTEs doing payroll, benefits, and HR. It's a lot.
For 1,300 employees
Yep.
active and 700 retirees.
Yep.
It is a lot. Thank you for
So
saying
yeah,
that.
but again, I think it sounds like we have some questions that we probably haven't had the chance for the council to digest fully. So if we can table it for next time, for our budget journey on the 8th, I think that would be helpful. Any sort of questions or objections to that from the rest of the council? All right, well, thank you. I apologize that we'll be bringing you back next
That's okay.
time.
That's okay.
But we appreciate the presentation and again, the
Thank you.
great work that's being done here. I do want to underscore, so this is, my field. I just want to underscore that when I look at the numbers for what we spend in healthcare, and I feel like I say this every year, we have an extraordinary story to tell in
Yes, we
terms of
do.
the savings that you and your department have generated. To go from, 14.2 to 14.9 in 13 years for spending this area. That is unheard of for
Yes.
any other employee health plan. So I really do commend you for the work that you do and the engagement that you have with each of our employees.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to item 5D, the cable television budget.
Last budget tonight is the cable TV access enterprise account. We're recommending that this budget be increased $340 over the current fiscal year. This budget is funded from receipts from our cable providers, which is Verizon, Comcast, and RCN, per the agreements signed with the town to provide public, educational, and governmental TV. This budget is based on prior and current year revenue estimates and is apportioned per the cable agreements that we have. Revenues have been trending down from our providers for these services. This budget here, personal services for fiscal '25 is $148,521 and is used for salaries at Wakefield High School for 2 teachers in their media department. Under contractual services, the amount of $348,195 is used for payments to WCAT, which is a 503C that was set up to provide these PEG services for the town. The capital revenue is $62,500 and is split between WCAT and Wakefield Public Schools, 1/3 to Wakefield Public Schools and 2/3 to WCAT, which is based on the number of channels each of those control. The total budget request for fiscal '25 is $559,216.
Mr. McDermott, we don't get to see you in front of the camera too often.
No, you don't.
Any comment from WCAT?
No, not really on the budget. We just wanted to thank the town council again for your commitment to the working group. And while it is not yet completed all of its work on this subject of trying to find other revenue sources for us, it has generated a lot of good discussion and some opportunities that we're looking into. So thank you very much for that.
Great, thank you. And question for you or Vice Chair McLean, who I know sits on the working group. Do we have a sense as to kind of a timeline of the work that you guys are doing?
I think we do, and town administrator can chime in on this as well. We've worked together on the working group. I think we're very close to presenting a report to the town council in the next, I'd say, we have one more meeting, I believe, before we would intend to do that. So we'll have a meeting in April. We'll come to the council with our recommendations. And we've already pretty much decided that we're not in an emergency situation at the moment this year. So we're going to continue the working group and hopefully recommend that we follow on no less than an annual basis and keep it open because there are probable problems funding-wise looming in the future.
Yes.
Is that an accurate statement? Would you
I'd say it's very accurate, and there's also some, areas that we need some information on. The streaming bill at the State House is, the committee I'm on has had a presentation on it. I like it. I think it's not a silver bullet, but it will resolve a lot of problems here. And I know that Chair Chines is on a committee, and they're going to hear something shortly on this.
We
correct?
are, yeah. The MMA's Fiscal Policy Committee is actually hearing from Rep. Machino, who's the House sponsor of the streaming bill tomorrow.
Excellent, yeah. So,
Yeah, so
Fingers crossed.
yeah. So the reason why it was not as dire as it was the previous year is because we've had turnover in our employees, and some of our older, more experienced employees have gone on to other jobs in other places. So we've been able to fill those positions with people who are not commanding quite as much of a salary. Although that is now going back up again, as it always does.
And just to let the council know, I mean, there are built-in reductions in revenue that CAT is going to see. We're going to see them.
Yep.
As more people stream, unless we get the streaming bill.
Unless we
If we
get the
get the streaming
streaming
bill,
bill,
maybe
yeah.
we get some money back, but,
Yeah. But yes, it's going to keep
Yeah.
going down, unfortunately.
yes.
Any questions or comments from the council? No? Seeing none, I will take a motion to approve the cable television budget as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr. McDermott, for being here today again in front of the camera, but also for all your support and for all the work that WCAT does for the town.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go hide behind my camera now.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
And Mr. Gill, thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Excellent. Let's move on to item 6, the annual town meeting article for capital planning. I believe we've got Mr. Conway and Mr. Renzi from the Capital Planning Committee. Welcome, guys. We'll let you go ahead and ask WCAT to put up the presentation.
Take it away, Phil.
Will it be on that TV?
Usually, yeah. It will be, yep.
Good evening. I'm Phil Renzi, Chairperson of the Capital Planning Committee. Other members are Dan Calori, Tracy Cleversey, Frank Conti, and Sam Hockenberry. We met with, starting in early February until last week, we met about twice a week on average, meeting with different departments. Our original ask on our list was about $9 million out of the tax levy. Water was about 730, and then sewer was about 660, I believe that says. So we invite all the departments to come with our whatever they're asking. We ask them to rate different tiers if there's different priorities. We review and then ask questions, follow-up questions in some cases. And then we prioritize and we have a discussion regarding the asks, and we evaluate sort of the impact or the severity of the requests that are made. these are example of some. I believe the full list of what was approved was submitted, and these are just some of the higher points of the items. We approved about $170,000 to the police department, which is an annual. We try to keep the fleet rotating. The problem in the last few years is that vehicles are taking up to a couple years to even come in. So you order it and then you wait, and then they have to get retrofitted. So keeping a rotating a fleet is important. And so this year, $170,000 for 2 police patrol and a detective. DPW, a new dump truck with snowplow. And for the fire department, we're in desperate need of a new rescue boat. The boat that they had been using was a 1980 Whaler. And they made a very strong case for the need, and we agreed. And so this is $75,000 towards that. For town hall, the elevator is at risk of being shut down if it didn't get new controls, basically a modernization. And so we approved that project. The fire department, where the fire engines pull in and out, the big doors, don't actually have safety edges. And so they've had a couple incidents where the door started to come down with a truck coming in or out, causing major damage to these doors. They're not very sturdy. And so these are the safety interlocks, they're called. It basically will sense, like an elevator, it will sense you in the way, and then the door won't go down. And then the main building at the Forest Glade Cemetery, we funded a $50,000 roof replacement. The fire alarm requested a vehicle detection system for the intersection of North Ave and Prospect. There was, oh, and time and attendance software. I can't see the ask. I should know it by heart. But $200,000 was a town ask for an update to the attendance software, and then $75,000 for crack sealing of the tennis courts, which is starting to show wear, a lot of cracks, and some safety concerns on that surface. So our recommended tax levy appropriation is $2,051,816. And the water enterprise, $254,000, and the sewer enterprise, $390,000. And thank you. So again, the full list I think was in your packet. So, any questions?
Great. Questions from the council. Councilor Smith-Galvin.
Thank you for this. I noticed the vehicles on there. Somebody's looking to make sure that it's in compliance with our vehicle policy?
Everyone.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
And similarly, any of the energy efficiency type stuff, just so, I mean, I know that people know that those are on the capital list. It doesn't look, to me, I don't see anything jumping out, but just that is always something that we're considering.
It is. So just to touch on that really quickly, we have the last piece of the designation grant that we need to coordinate with some lighting fixtures in the public safety building. And then I wasn't at the meeting where the working group had a great discussion.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion.
So that will definitely be something that we'll be talking about in the very near future.
Thank you. Thanks. This looks like I know it's a very difficult process to whittle it down, so thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Dabrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this, Mr. Renzi. A couple quick clarifying questions. I noticed that with the police, it was cruisers, 2 patrol cars and 1 detective.
Mm-hmm.
The ask had been 245, but the recommendation is 170.
Sure.
So how does that get reconciled?
Sure.
What is, like in practical terms?
Yeah, so the original request was for 3 cruisers. One was potentially going to be an EV, electric. The Chevy Blazer has come out with a new patrol package for the new EV. So there was discussion about adding that in. During the first round of big cuts that we had to make, starting at $9 million, the committee discussed narrowing the request down to 2 vehicles to try to just whittle that. Initially, it was $245,000. So I spoke to the chief about that, and what he looked at his fleet again, and the detective car needs very little retrofitting, and so the actual cost of the end of the car showing up was less. And so he thought it was more important to keep the 3 vehicle in rotation, did some math with his numbers, just figured out he could keep a newer computer system and not have to replace it, and came back with a revised request for $170,000 for the 2 patrol cruisers and 1 detective car. And then the committee accepted that.
So I'm sorry, did you say originally it was 3 patrol cruisers?
It was 3 cruisers.
And 1 detective?
No, just 3 cruisers.
Just 3 cruisers?
Yeah.
Got it,
And the
okay.
revision was 2 cruisers with 1 detective
Because the
vehicle.
detective is less than the cruisers?
Yes.
If I can piggyback off of that too, so a lot of the times you'll see the original estimated amount on the left, especially with my stuff, tends to be very conservative the first round, and then as we get more comfortable, the committee gets more comfortable. I'll speak for my group. As we go back to the dealers and different outfitters and say sharpen your pencils, then that change starts to be reflected in the recommended amount.
And then the other question I had was related to, this falls under IT, the time and attendance software. $200,000 just seems like a lot of money. Can you help us understand a little bit more about, what kind of vetting?
Sure. So I'll take this. Not to steal any of the presentation points that Ms. Forziati made before me, but what was discovered on a town-wide basis is that different departments are all using, most of us are using something slightly different. That is an outside program methodology, whatever each individual group is using, that needs to be transferred into Munis, like she mentioned. So for my group, we have punch clocks located throughout town in the 7 or 8 different buildings that we work in. That is a standalone software as a service. That needs to then bridge over an electric file and talk to payroll. It's totally inefficient. So one of the things we started talking about, Munis gave us a good presentation on, was that they actually have their own time and attendance software capabilities that speak directly into the product, that actually generates payroll, your benefits, everything. So it made sense from a town level to get my group, I know there's interest in the fire department, and different other areas in town to be all on one system. The number obviously is quite large, but this is essentially going to cover something that is essentially town-wide.
So is this 200,000 then so DPW would start to use this system, but it would then be available to other departments as an add-on without additional cost, or?
However the rollout happens, I'm not 100% sure of that. That'd be an IT question. I know that our group would use it. I know there's interest in the fire department. They use it at town hall and different places like that. Everybody be getting it at the same time. How it phases out to roll that out, I'm not 100% sure. I know my group is ready and willing to start first. The product that we use is actually being phased out. So if we don't have anything else, we'll function a little bit archaic, and we don't want to go back to paper, but.
So this 200 basically is town-wide, not just department specific?
Correct. It'll cover anybody that uses it, and it'll all be essentially point right back into the Munis software program, which is the hub of all the data related to HR and everything like that. It'll eliminate, requiring bridges or different file compatibilities and things like that. Everything will be on the same language, the same place.
So wouldn't that then streamline HR operations?
It would streamline. It would take away some of the pain points from payroll, I think, but that is done at an individual department level. So approvals and things like that. So a great example, and I'll just use my group. So we have 2 running lists of accruals. So, I'll use myself as an example. If I have 2 weeks of vacation a year, if I don't maintain that independently to what is already being maintained by HR, then there comes a discrepancy. And you can imagine with 80 people, discrepancies happen, things get crossed, you have to go back and look and trace things. So what that'll end up doing is eliminate the need for any redundancy, and I'll point right back to that main central database.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair Chines. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Just 2 quick things. The ADA improvements in the miscellaneous question, the $50,000, can you just briefly describe what those improvements would be?
So the Capital Planning Committee was very gracious to us to give us some funding to do a transition study. So we looked at a whole bunch of different buildings in town, and essentially the deliverable that came out of it was a punch list of recommended projects. Some of the most obvious ones, we've talked about on a grander scale, elevator access to 911 Albion, things like that. But we also found some things like door swings, door widths, as far as the actuators and things like that, like the weights. So what we have is a working list for some of those things. And with this, we're going to start to be able to take away at that. So we could show that we've gone out, we've surveyed, we've identified all the gaps and things that we need to change. Code changes, the occupancy of the building sometimes changes. That's why some of these things pop up. So now we're going to be able to start chipping away at that and working through that punch list.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to say I was really pleased to see that the fire response boat was in there from 1980. I was the liaison last year to the fire department, and I got a chance to see that boat. And I'll just mention that in 1980, I was 20, and my hair was not the color it is now, and it was in a ponytail. So it's nice to see you finally decided to.
I'm sorry, can we pause for a second on that comment, Councilor Vincent?
I was in college. All right. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McLean.
Just briefly, did the fire come to you guys again this year for the pumper? Was that part of your presentation?
That was on the original $9 million list.
Right.
And the big items like that, we usually discuss. Most likely, that would be a better warrant article.
Yeah.
So that discussion happened pretty quickly in the process.
Sure. And when you say 9 to 11, is that ACE? Is that the ACE
Yes.
building?
Yes.
So are you actually going to, in the process of making that handicapped?
We will be. We're going to be seeking grant funding for that. Some of the project estimates are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but there are very accomplishable projects like at the Doyle School, some other different buildings through town. For $10,000 to $14,000, we can take the 2 or 3 things off the punch list and make that happen. So we'll be working through that.
Do you have the architect's report that was done a year or 2 ago, or whenever it was, relative to the ACE, showing some of the potential problems with handicap, like some of the bathrooms?
Yep,
Do you
some
have
of the
that?
bathrooms. I know the front entrance, the back entrance that our ADA coordinator's been working on.
Right.
With
Do you
the
have access
easements
to the
and-
report on?
Yes.
talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. We have a secondary one that I could share with the council too that went above and beyond that and kind of took a look at everything.
Right. I noticed, and thanks for the work that your committee does, I don't want to leave that out. But I noticed that we usually on the tax levy try to keep it to 2 million, 2.1, right? Almost historically, but last year we did do 2.4 and we had the 300,000 in there for the Civil War Memorial. But I remember, I think, Joe, you had indicated we got a grant on that. What happens with a grant? Does it go back into capital funding? If we get a grant on something that's been funded through capital funding for 300,000, et cetera.
We've had that happen a few times. So if we get a grant, we will leave whatever is appropriated in this list alone and not touch it. And then it would roll back to either the tax levy, or it could potentially be something that the capital planning committee comes back together and reappropriates the funding for. We've had a few happen on a small scale with the high school. There's actually the potential of one in this list as is presented tonight that could be the same thing. So generally, the appropriation becomes your, insurance policy because you never know what exactly is going to happen with the grant process.
We have, if we vote the 2 million tonight, does that close the doors? For example, if this council wanted to bring to you one more item, say for example, $400,000 for renovations at the senior center, second floor, could that still be considered?
Within the $2 million budget we are instructed to stay within, I would say probably not.
Well, last year we did 2.4.
We were looking, we were expecting to get more money than last year. We understand that maybe some, whatever budget, the budgeting is something that I'm new to the chair, and next year I'm going to get ahead of to make sure that it's very clear what our budget is before we start and to maximize it, because we need to be maximizing capital improvements. We're spending $2 million is what we were spending 10 fiscal years ago.
Yeah.
We haven't increased that, and anyone who's bought anything in the last 10 years knows the things have not stayed the same. So as a town, we really need to be prioritizing capital spending and trying to maximize the contribution every year. This year, our goal was around 2 million. This is where we ended up.
Right. So if we increased it like we did last year to 2.4,
Yeah.
you wouldn't necessarily be fighting us over that.
No, but the 400,000, I know that's, there are other items we cut that would be up against. And that's, again, we're cutting a lot of high priority items. And so it becomes a difficult discussion. But it'd be definitely discussed, and we'd welcome that if that's on the list next year to discuss it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? I just, I'll add a question on it. I just do see that we have a few items on the list, probably about $75,000 of initiatives for the DPW building. where are we in terms of, the feasibility study for the DPW facility itself? And, I'm asking just because it feels like we're kind of approaching an inflection point where we either have to make a decision as to whether we are, making some more substantial repairs to that facility or, looking at an alternative. And I just want to understand, where some of these costs fit within the timing of those decisions.
So for the past, I'd probably say 3 years, we've consciously delayed or deferred anything that's other than necessity there. Related to the feasibility study, sometime this spring, I could tell you the path that we went down and the path that we ultimately took became much more involved. I don't think there's any stone in town we didn't turn over to try to figure out what may or may not be possible. And without, at the expense of sounding presumptuous, I believe that when the final report gets presented, there'll be a couple of options, and we'll be at a crossroads of the further direction to pursue. From an economic development standpoint, we certainly understand where we are, what we do, and why it would be better to function essentially as anything else other than an industrial construction complex. So all that being said, I would imagine sometime after town meeting, we'll be back in front of the permanent building committee with what that turned over, what some of the options are. Looked at a bunch of different sites in town. It took a lot longer than we expected. We were asked to take a look at Broadway and see what we could do there. As you can imagine, we had a heck of a time with the pickleball court next to Lake Quannapowitt. You can imagine building what we needed to do next to drinking water supply is even more difficult, but we needed to go through that tangled web. So we will be in soon. I think we'll be at a fork in the road. Whether we take a left or right will dictate what our next steps might be.
So as we look at the items that are here, the garage doors, the garage heater, electric service, is that work, even if we approve the capital planning budget and it gets approved at town meeting, is that work that we would not contract or start until we have that presentation to permanent building, or how does this fit within?
No, so the garage doors piece is really just a wear component.
Okay.
They're up and down all the time. They're very heavy.
Yeah.
That's something where, the way that they're put together, they almost become like a stretched out slinky. Those really should be replaced from that standpoint. The electrical service is just to get rid of some fuses so that any of the work that we may or may not be doing down there is safer for our electricians. And then as far as the garage door heater, we've tried to get by without that. This is for our fleet maintenance, our fleet garage, which is the larger of the two. At this juncture, some of the conditions and the other things in there warrant the replacement. So, believe me, we don't want to make any strained investments, and bare bones will happen until that is fully, put out there, and the town has the option to weigh in on what that future might hold.
Okay, so what you're describing is not sort of throwaway work that would be obviated. I mean, it's work that would be obviated if we were in a new facility, but it is stuff that does need to happen to basically keep the building functioning in the interim.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I'd say it's similar to the discussions we had when high school requests were coming in during those feasibility studies. We still had to maintain the building and keep it usable.
Yep.
But at the same time, at the understanding of not dumping huge amounts of money for things. So we had similar conversations regarding the DPW request and understood it to be important to keep the shop running. So.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the work, Mr. Renzi, that you and your committee do. It's always hard to go from a large number to a smaller number. I will say I think it's something that we probably need to look at more holistically around our level of capital spending. Obviously, we have a number of building projects going on, including a very, very large capital project in the high school. But it's probably something that warrants some discussion in terms of, how we index our capital target with inflation. One thing I think we also need to be mindful of is that, we did drop the budget by $1 million in the year where we had the uncertainty around COVID. And so we've never really made up for that $1 million. We've just kind of gotten back up to the run rate where we were beforehand. Any other questions? Councilor Nabrowski.
I just want to point out, because I think Mr. Renzi, you make a really good point about this budget not going up and keeping pace with costs. So basically we're getting less with the same dollars. And I don't know, Mr. Mayo, a number of these items, when I look at them, are school related. And I think about a budget that's $52.3 million. And then it seems like we're taking from the very limited pot here, again, towards school. What do we have any sort of arrangement with the school budgeting that allows them to assume some of this responsibility to free up some of this cash for some of the non-school expenditures?
Well, the reason why I like having the school expenditures, if you may, within the capital budget is that these guys are the subject matter experts, and they go through everything. And remember that years and years ago, way back when, capital was in the school budget, but they have line item authority, so that could be moved to operations.
I'm just wondering if
Yeah.
there's a way that we can somehow assign some of this to the school budget, if that makes sense, so that we
No,
can,
I understand what you're saying.
because we
but-
don't, I like, not even so much from like a control standpoint, because I understand what you're saying, the subject matter experts, and you have a great team, you're able to prioritize, but I'm just looking at this, and it's like there's less money available.
Well, there is, and they're gonna, Phil's been chomping at the bit. Steve told me to keep this, I'm gonna admit, this budgeting year was a tough year. State aid is down. We have a lot of other expenses.
But the school budget doesn't
Well, school
reflect
budget
that.
is gonna be.
Doesn't reflect that, though.
Well, that's one thing.
Right.
So this had to come in a little bit less. I think it was 2.24 last year, not 2.4, but that's close. Take a
I'll
look.
check.
Check. I think it's 2.24.
I'll tell you right now.
Maybe you make a liar out of it.
I'll tell you how much it was in 2001. My kid had a homework, so I sat at the library, which has great archives, and I read all the town meeting, all the books. It was, last year was 2.239 was the official, yeah.
That's what I thought.
I think the 3-year running average is just about 2.
It's about
About 2 million.
We,
yeah.
we cut millions from the school requests, so
Yeah.
there was a lot that we pushed back, that did get pushed back to the schools. This was the approved list that you're seeing, but there was a large amount of other requests that we couldn't fund, that did, I would imagine, I would hope they get completed through the school budget in
Yeah.
some way, because some of the
Yeah,
repairs need to happen, so.
So we will, but your point's well taken. We should look at that.
I just think it's
Look at the
important
future,
to,
yeah.
when we're talking about what the school's cost is in the aggregate, where we're not just talking about the school budget, but things like this too, like it becomes additive.
Councilor McLean?
Schools are now, to me, it's all the same bucket ultimately in the end, but another idea that I would posit to my cohorts is if we've got full reserves, which we do, if we're taxing slightly less than 2.5, because we have full reserves under our tax policy, which we voted against, but those reserves are there. That might be a year where we would automatically do 2.5 or some better increment for capital funding generally. Just an idea.
I think if you do look what we spend on capital and on our borrowings and our bonds, we are really within the band of, I would say, better practices around.
You're not saying if we,
could
you're not
always
saying
spend
if we go to
more. I like
2.5,
it.
we're going to lose
Yeah.
the,
No,
the,
no, no,
the
it's-
budget rating, are you, or the
Every little bit
the
helps.
AAA?
Every little bit helps.
Yeah.
Further questions on the capital budget? All right, seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the capital planning article as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight
Thank
and
you.
for the great work to get us here today.
Thank you.
Can we, while we've got Joe here, can we just ask him some questions? Sorry.
All right.
What would you like to ask
So,
about?
Just about the public comments we had at
Okay.
the start of the meeting. So I just, we got, Chair Chines read about the water bills. I got a couple of phone calls this past week and today, so I thought maybe if you could explain what happened a little bit, we'd appreciate it and the audience would appreciate it.
Sure. So, from a customer service standpoint, I think there are 3 parts to that. There's a customer service piece, a postage piece, and then there's the part about automatic payment, I think was the
Right,
last
yeah,
piece.
Electronic payment.
Right. So, from the customer service stand piece, across the board, it's pretty much demanded out of all 80 of us that a couple things happen every time we interact with someone. So first, we listen, we show empathy to whoever it is that we're working with. And the third thing is that we offer whatever suggestions we have or resources we have to fix the problem. I can tell you related to the front office, both myself and the business manager sit within an earshot of everything that happens. Oftentimes we're sitting out on the floor directly ourselves. I don't know exactly whatever may or may not have gone down. I'm not saying that one side is right and one side that isn't, but I could tell you that if one of the two of us were around, if what I presume was the point that was getting across through some of the public participation, that doesn't fly with us, and it's totally not acceptable. So one of the things we expect is that we're courteous to whoever's on the other side of the window, and that's reciprocated, and we can work together to come up with whatever the resolution may be. Related to water bills, I've heard some of the things today about what may or may not be happening out there on the internet. I could say that's not exactly what's being brought forth at the window with us. Anything that, where anybody might insinuate that this is planned, that this is some sort of big, hocus pocus, couldn't be anything further from the truth. What I can tell you that every quarter we send out approximately 8,400 bills for water and sewer. When those go out, they get metered through the post office. We get a report back that says 8,400 of those went. This last quarter, the quarter in question, I know that 8,400 and I think 7 bills went out. To date, we have not had any returned to us. So if anything happens to be undeliverable, our return address is part of the mailing process. Will come back to us. When we get that, sometimes things happen. A building may be demoed, it may be vacant, certain things like that. If it's an issue with the mail, we'll actually go hand deliver it to the house. So we can follow the billing point up to, there's a break in custody when, we do turn it over. So that is one of the things that gets said quite often. If someone doesn't get a bill for some reason, one of the things we always say is if you double check with the post office, because up until that point when, that transition happens, now we're totally reliant on another service. I would say to anybody out there that may be listening to this, I would recommend anytime you have any questions, please come reach out to us, whether it's in person, via email, what have you. We're more than willing to work with anybody on any issue. Our billings generally go at the beginning of January, April. There's a July bill and October bill. I'll dovetail into the automatic payment piece. So right now, we use one vendor that I won't get into detail as far as the name is concerned. We've been working with them for basically a year, trying to get them to get their service compatible with the way we do bills. And we're at the point where we've reached impasse with them. One of the hiccups is that the way that our bills are done, there's a discount date that I think is, to Wakefield as American as apple pie. It's been in existence for a long time. It rewards prompt payment. It does great for us related to collections. The hiccup with the way that the current vendor is set up is then after a certain date, the due date, the amount due goes from the discount total to the gross total. And for whatever reason, they can't get their program to function that. We've going through different bills, sending them multiple files, however we can to do that, and we don't seem to be able to do that. We've reached out to other vendors, and we think that, there is the possibility of that happening. One of the things with that, though, unfortunately, is it's bigger than just water and sewer. We've kind of relayed a little bit of that to Steve. We haven't had the full conversation yet, but, this would be something that, unfortunately, our group doesn't sign the contract, for that banking service. It would come through the treasurer's office, and it would affect excise taxes and other things like that quite heavily. If, we had a magic wand or a crystal ball, though, we think that we would be able to probably pivot from where we are now to get that accomplished, because I think we echo the same thing that some of our constituents say, where, we should be able to do this, and, it's widespread across a variety of industries. And the fact that we haven't been able to accomplish that the way that we're set up right now with the partner that we have in that right now is, quite frankly, a little bit disappointing. I don't know if I covered everything there, or you want to get into anything more, but that's kind of...
No, I mean, I think that's helpful. Thank you. I'm glad you're exploring potential new vendors. It seems like that's a problem. I just, been doing this for 7 years and never gotten so much. And so I think I understand that mail issues happen, but it just seemed like this last quarter there was more problems than normal. And I know you work with your team about customer service, but when we get that many emails and complaints, like there's some sort of disconnect. right? So as much as you can investigate that and kind of re-up on, customer service, because I just the volume that I got this past week, haven't had that in 7 years.
Sure. And based on that, honestly, is the reason why I went into the reports and looked to see, what we generate for bills versus what got metered to make sure it matched. And typically I wouldn't necessarily look at that. But knowing that, just to make sure that any due diligence on our end, because if it's an us thing, we want to identify it and correct it immediately. Unfortunately, we don't know. We just don't know at this point in time. But anybody out there is having any issues, please get in contact with us. It's much easier to deal directly than interpret, what may be out there and whatnot. Sometimes misinformation spirals and things like that. It's much easier to go A, B.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Moving on, let's move to item 7A, the food pantry storage container. So please come on up and have a seat, and thank you for your patience this evening.
Oh, no problem. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you guys.
If you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, and we'll let you
Yep.
go ahead.
So my name is Maureen Miller. I'm the executive director of the Wakefield Food Pantry. Sitting with me is Rose Finn. She's on the food pantry board, and she's been instrumental in a lot of the programs that you'll hear about tonight. And Steve Doherty is the food pantry treasurer, and he did a lot of research into the storage container, so he'll be presenting some of that tonight. Okay, so press a button. Oh, I did it. Good job. So I'd just like to start with a quick overview of the Wakefield Food Pantry over the last few years. As you can see by the numbers, they're pretty staggering since 2021. We've had a 55% increase in people coming through our door visiting us. We're serving over 200 more households now than we did in 2021, and that's due to increased need. Benefits have been reduced since COVID, and we've actually improved our outreach in terms of programs, in terms of reaching more who are food insecure in our community. At the same time, our donations have gone down 25%. As you may know, most charitable donations have decreased since the pandemic, and that a lot of that's due to people having to tighten their budgets because of inflation. And actually, there's been less, this affects us more, that there's less focus now than there was on the pandemic on basic needs, on food. That was a big thing during the pandemic, less so now. So that's affecting us. At the same time, we're seeing a huge increase in our food costs. So there's a number of factors involved with that. We're serving more people, as I said. So if you're serving more people, you have to get more food in the door, you're buying more food. The Greater Boston Food Bank, which is a big source of our food and low-cost food, is dealing with its own issues. They have had labor issues since COVID, have not had a full staff since COVID, and they don't have the availability and the variety of food that we were used to before. As an example, COVID and pre-COVID, we could have an order of 10 pages. It's down to 3 or 4 pages now in terms of what we can choose from to get from them. So the amount of food we're getting from them has decreased. As a result, we've had to go out and purchase at higher cost retail stores. And we all know what has happened at the grocery store. So I don't need to say more about that. So all those things have contributed to our increase in food costs. To counter that, we have recently, as a week ago, hired a part-time development director. And hopefully they're going to help us meet that gap between our donations and increased food costs, and help us fund new programs at some point in time. It's a more long-term project, but hopefully with her help, we will be able to solve some of that. The next slide just goes into a little bit more detail about the growth in Wakefield over the last few years. As mentioned, we are serving over 200 more households than we were in 2021. In 2021, we served 481 households. I'm projecting 700, and I actually think it's going to be higher than 700, but I'm projecting 700 through the end of fiscal year 2024, which is over 200 families.
All that results in more visits to our pantry, more programs that we are funding and supplying for, and more pounds of food that we have to get in the door and then out the door, hopefully to those in need. So who are the people coming to us? A lot of people will ask us that. Well, due to our increased programming, which Rose will go into in a little bit more detail, we are definitely reaching more of the senior population than we have in the past. And that's through our mobile pantries at Harts Hill and Crystal View. We hope to increase those mobile pantries to the Lincoln School and possibly the frequency of how many times we have these mobile pantries. We also have a quick stop pantry at the senior center, which we actually stock a pantry for anybody who's at the senior center, that they can have access to food there. Over the last few years, we've developed a strong relationships with the schools, especially the English as a second language teachers. And as a result, we're reaching more families through them. And we have a pantry at the Galvin Middle School now that we stock, that teachers, nurses, counselors can bring their students down and pick out food for the weekend for those families that they know are in need. We hope to expand that to other schools too. And we have a Kids First program which supplies kid-friendly food during the summer months when the kids are not having their free breakfast and lunch. So in that program, Rose will talk about further, but that is really growing. But in reality, we could be serving your neighbors. Nobody can see hunger. Hunger is hidden, especially in suburbs. We can't see into our neighbor's refrigerator. We can't see into our neighbor's cabinets. And being food insecure is not something people want to admit to. Stigma is a big issue and a big challenge that we're always dealing with in terms of reaching people and having them come to us. And it's one of the reasons we've started focusing on bringing food out to families versus limiting them to coming into the pantry. In light of that, I'd like to turn this over to Rose, who will talk to you more about some of those outreach programs that we've developed over the last few years.
A few years back, we undertook a strategic plan that determined that there was more that we could do to reach the food insecure population in town. We brainstormed with various groups and hired a consultant to come up with ways to reach more of the population that weren't coming to the pantry, either due to the pantry hours not working for them, lack of transportation, or, as Maureen mentioned, the stigma. In response, we developed many of these new, what we call external programs, which are focused on bringing food out to the community. And most of these programs were developed after COVID or have really taken off since COVID. And then in a few short years, these programs have really grown to more than we've anticipated, and the demand it continues to be strong. There's more that we can do to get food out the door and into the community, but one of our biggest challenges is storage.
Can I change it?
Sure, page. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some of these programs. I'm sure, as all of you are aware, when you think of the pantry, you think of the pantry that we have at the Civic Center. As Maureen mentioned, there's been a huge increase in people coming to the pantry. In addition to that, our Kids First program, which we started after all of the federal funding for meals during the summer ended, we started that in the summer of 2022. We served 15 families. Last year, in summer 2023, we served 50 families, and indications are that that number is going to increase even more. As Maureen mentioned, we started a in-house pantry at the Galvin. Working with the Galvin staff, we developed the pantry stocked with kid-friendly, non-perishable food items to serve school families that teachers identified as being food insecure, and we're looking into possibly expanding this program to other schools, including the high school. The senior mobile pantry, we currently bring, once a month, we go to Harts Hill and Crystal View, and we provide them with pantry stables, fresh fruits and vegetables, proteins, etc. And we're looking to expand to the Lincoln School and possibly increasing distribution to twice a month. The vet supplement is, we supply toiletries to 24 vets in town to supplement the food that they're receiving from the VA. The after-school snack program is as teachers told us that middle and high schoolers are often hungry during the school day or during after-school activities. Although they receive free breakfast and lunch, we heard that kids are not getting enough to eat or not bringing snacks from home to supplement the free meals. Teachers were buying snacks out of their own pocket. So we stepped in and started supplying microwavable meals, granola bars, cereals, that type of thing, to the Galvin and to the high school. The Senior Quick Stop at the Senior Center, we stock a mini pantry that's accessible to seniors attending programs at the Senior Center. The emergency bins, as we currently supply 2 churches and the police station with snacks and microwavable meals to meet the immediate need that for anyone who comes to their door that's hungry. The Little Free Pantries, we sponsored 4 around town about 6 months ago. These are open 24/7 year-round and provide an anonymous, judgment-free way to get food whenever needed. The usage has exceeded our expectations, and although it's a community effort, and the community's been great about helping to stock them, the pantry's there as a backstop. We see increased demand and opportunities across most of these programs and would like to continue to grow them to reach more food insecure households, but the lack of storage is one of our biggest challenges. The most immediate storage need is to supply for the Kids First program, which will start sourcing food in May. And without additional storage, we can't possibly grow the program, or we may have to limit distribution instead of twice a month per family to maybe one time per month, or cut back on the variety of food that we distribute. Now, if you look at the next page on page 6, this is our current storage space dedicated to external programs. And for anyone who has visited the pantry recently, you'll see that we maximize every inch of space that's available to us.
Every corner.
Literally. So we appreciate all the support that we've received from the town and ask you to continue to support in granting us approval for this much-needed storage capacity to continue our mission. Now I'm going to turn it over to Steve Doherty, our treasurer, to discuss the storage trailer.
So by way of background, we have 3 storage areas in the building, in the Civic Center in the basement. They total 340 square feet, which is not a lot, obviously, and you can see by the way we're stacking everything on top of each other. We previously had 2 smaller rooms in the basement that we no longer have. That was 124 square feet. And last summer we had a small pod unit out in the back for 70 square feet. So we've lost all those. We've looked around. There's no other space within the building. We have also looked at an outside source space throughout the town. We haven't found anything yet. And obviously we love the fact that we're right downtown on the bus lines. It's great for our clients. So with all that said and done, we've decided that we're looking for a steel storage space. It's a 40 feet by 8 foot container. As you can see on the picture here, it would sit to the right of the HVAC unit and sort of replace that small construction trailer that is there right now. That, as I said, the storage space is a 40 by 8, so it would afford 320 extra square foot storage, which is basically double the size we have right now. And with all the programs we have going on, it's certainly a great need. I looked at many different companies, and Wayside Trailers in Peabody can custom fit a unit for us, much like the blue one on the left there. They can paint it to any color we want. We can have it vinyl wrapped, so it'd be up to you guys if you were to approve it as to how you would like it to look. We can make it aesthetically so it fits anywhere within the area. As far as our presentation tonight, we are in a little bit of a time crunch in the sense that, as Rose mentioned, we'd like to have this in place by mid-May to start putting shelving in and start stocking it to get ready for our Kids First program, which will start mid to late June. The construction time is approximately 6 weeks for this company in Peabody. So would be asking if it's possible for you guys to approve this evening so that I could go forward with getting us in the queue for the construction with this facility.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Just before we open it up to the council, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, just continued thank you to the food pantry for the great work that you do in town. I mean, you know, the numbers don't lie, and I think we all know that you serve an incredibly important need for so many of our neighbors and friends, and that comes with a lot of effort and a lot of sweat equity from the volunteer board as well. So first of all, just thank you for the great work that you're doing and for being such an important part of the community. One quick question. I'm assuming the trailer itself is climate controlled so that you don't have...
Yes, it is. One of our needs was to be climate controlled, so there's both floor heating and AC units on either end.
Okay, and would you have refrigeration in there as well, or would it just be...
We would probably bring in a fridge or two.
Okay. Okay, great. Let me open it up to the council for questions or comments. I was going to say this is a quiet group. Councilor Smith-Gallo, I'm not used to this.
Well, just because I'm looking, I mean, and I don't really need an answer to this. It's not going to block any windows, right, or any other.
Well, to be honest, there are windows there. It will block a little bit of the windows. I did speak to Dan McGrath about that. Dan came out and is in full support of this.
Okay.
And he had no problem at all. I pointed the windows out. I said, "Oh no, there's windows there, Dan," and he said, "No problem at all." He had no problem with it.
Okay, so it won't block the whole window.
No, the windows are
8.5 feet tall.
Okay. And then it looks like there's like maybe an air conditioning unit on the other side. I don't know whether there's one behind that trailer there.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure
actually
that they'll figure all that.
our air conditioner that goes into the
Okay.
pantry itself. But yes, we would have to
So
work around
it would
it.
sit to the left of that unit.
Okay. I mean, I don't
It's funny you can see that air conditioner.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you for the presentation and for the work you're doing. I'm actually really concerned about the numbers that you provide. I'd like to see those numbers going down, not up.
It absolutely is. It's a sort of a double-edged sword.
Right.
We're trying to show you our numbers are going up. That's not necessarily a good story.
Right.
Good story to be telling.
Exactly. Now, 40 feet, just so we have some perspective, if we start at I'll say the leftmost side of the air conditioner,
Yep.
how far across would 40 feet?
It'll come within a few feet of the edge of the building. So it takes up almost that whole space. From the AC unit on our right as you look at it,
Yeah.
all the way to the left corner of the building.
And what is that there? That's a hitch of some sort, right? What is that currently? The
I
trailer?
think it was there when they were repointing the
pointing.
building.
Okay.
So it's a flat blade trailer that I'm assuming they brought some equipment in on, and it has not been removed. So we basically were saying, move that, and we'll drop our container.
I think, from my perspective, because although it's the back of the building, it is rather exposed, as you know, just the location where it is. My biggest concern is the aesthetic of it, in that the AmeriCal has a lot of historical significance, and there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about the AmeriCal, with good reason. And I would just ask that, any kind of color scheme or anything of the sort be integrated in a way that it subtly blends in with versus stands, like the blue is probably like not the best example.
Right, it's-
No, I know, but
I'm just going to pick the brightest color we can find.
Yeah.
If there's someone that we would work with, we could wrap it in a brick look.
Yeah.
That could
So it
maybe
blends
blend in with the building.
I mean, like
Put it
that
with
to me
solid
makes
color.
that to me like instinctually is like that makes more sense. I mean, I'm having heart palpitations looking at this blue. And we're fortunately getting rid of one of these containers down by the lake, and so the idea of kind of adding one into the inventory is a little bit concerning. So I think to the extent we can make it so it doesn't look like it does, I think that's just a really important piece aesthetically. Again, because it's a very exposed area when you come down that way, although it's behind a building. Thank you, but otherwise, thank you for your great work, truly.
Other questions or comments? I just may make a pitch as we think about the aesthetics of it. To what extent can we think about this as an opportunity for public art? I mean, right, this is the Civic
yeah.
Center. We have a lot of youth programming and it goes through, and we have an incredible visual arts legacy and program in Wakefield. And so, I would just maybe encourage you to think about that and engaging with the arts department at the high school to see if there's something that we could do there.
We also are partners, or starting a partnership with is Kathy Frey.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, and because she wants to do some things with our hallway going down into the pantry itself, so I could speak to her about it too. That's a
Yeah,
great
but
idea.
beyond that, I mean, I would agree that the blue example is probably a little striking.
We'll make it blend in.
No, absolutely. Councilor Smith-Galvin.
The Boys and Girls Club don't use this back parking lot
No.
for
No.
anything, right? Okay.
No.
No, I mean, my experience has been that it's mostly storage of
Yeah.
vehicles and, kind of other stuff on a seasonal basis.
Some
It's
parking,
not,
right?
even parking, it seems
It's
pretty
not.
rarely used.
And
We
from-
want somebody
that
backing
is only
into
two
it.
spots if it is parking.
Yeah.
Nobody's
Right.
using.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fine with taking away
So
parking.
there's parking opposite it, about like 8 or 10 spaces.
The opposite,
Yeah,
yeah.
in the back, far back of the lot, yeah.
Against the house.
Just with Galvin, there might be some issues with dodgeball, though. That's a
That's
very
so
good
true.
wall in the back.
We have no problem, no problem preventing ourselves from participating in dodgeball. Any other questions or comments from the council? So seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the proposal of citing a 40-foot by 8-foot food pantry storage container in the back of the Civic Center. Do we have a motion?
As long as it's not in the blue, so moved.
Okay, no blue.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
I assume you'll coordinate with Mr. Mayo's office
Yep.
around
Yep. Yep.
logistics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mayo, I assume you're coming back. Oh, good.
Oh, you want-
As we move to item 7B, which requires your input. Item 7B is a continuing discussion around the American Rescue Plan Act proposals that we've been discussing. So, Mr. Mayo, I'll let you kick it off with your
Thank you,
presentation.
Thank you. A very, very brief update. Thank you for the councilors for getting in all of their rankings so I could put together a couple of rankings for everybody for the whole presentation here today. Quickly to go through, we know that Wakefield got about $8 million. We've been through this before. Through the budget process the last few years, we spent a little bit for different areas. And again, weaning this off of the budgets, we didn't want to have a non-recurring income for recurring costs. We did spend a lot on basic opera expenditures in the beginning of, and COVID expenditures in the beginning of this. And council approved a number of items on November 14th, 2022. You saw these numbers before. And then on 3/11, some more items were approved. The Inspire Cafe for $150,000, and assessment of historic structures for $25,000, which leaves us with about $1.8 million and some change. So the councilors did send in a number of items that we talked about at the last meeting, a little bit, I guess. And then there was a ranking system that is in your package. I tried to do it two ways. One was a point system, lowest to highest. So if you ranked it first, it was 14 points, and then the highest one came out there to you guys there. And then I kind of said how many rank things first and second and third, and that's all in your package. So of the items that we talked about, the 14 items that were left after the last meeting, I'll go through that in a second. And again, we got to make sure the contracts are signed on these by 12/31/24. Tom may talk about that in a little bit about one of our sister communities, who he gave them a sleepless night when he said to them, "Have you thought about this?" in one of theirs. So anyways, I have starred what I think, when you looked at this, were the top 8 items by the council. Renovations of the senior center, and these are in no particular order, just how they were on the slide. Renovations of the senior center, sidewalk extension, Albion Cultural Exchange, pet access to Lake and Yacht Club, solar panels for the Galvin School, money for the Affordable Housing Trust, Wakefield Food Pantry, which is separate from this, what they were talking about today, from what was stated at the last meeting. Some other items that didn't make what I thought to be the most, had most consensus, and the Small Business Incubator Fund. So in your package are rankings from 1 to 8, but those are the 14 items that we talked about. They have a much greater value than the 1.8 million we have. So for those out there in TV land thinking everything here is approved, unfortunately, no. It's kind of like the capital plan. we're narrowing it down from 8 million to 1.8 million. When I talked about making sure that money was spent by 12/31/24, federal government, when they put the American Rescue Plan Act together, basically came out and said everything had to be designated or obligated by 12/31/24, and we've worked under that assumption, and that hasn't changed. There is some rumblings that not only do items need to be obligated or designated or put in a direction by 12/31/24, but they need to be contracted. So, contractor for a sidewalk is easy, right? Have a contractor plan for sidewalk, $250,000. Money going into a fund that will then come out later is a little bit harder to say it's contracted. So we have to make sure that that money is as locked up as it can be. It's very hard to get a straight answer out of the federal government on what that means. I would certainly like to be in an area where we can't pull it back ourselves for something that it is locked up, almost like an irrevocable. I'm using the word irrevocable trust, and I'm hoping that that is something that is appropriate with the federal government. Even then, I mean, we're going to have to find that out. So we may come back and say we need to do something different, but I think we're at a point where council can certainly vote, if they wish tonight, to designate some more or all of the items. So very quick, very brief. I know it's 9:30. Didn't want to hear me talk. You guys had to talk. So get it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Before we get to sort of the future items, I want to just take a look at one of the previous approvals. So we talked about this a little bit last time, which was the Energy Assistance Fund. Folks may recall I asked Mr. Mayo, are there any areas that we've kind of allocated already where we weren't sure if we would spend them? And that was the one that was highlighted. And so what I'd like to do is actually to open up the discussion specific to that initiative, just to see if we can come to a consensus as a council as to whether that's something that we want to roll over for another year with the expectation that we spend the full 400,000, or whether we want to improve, sort of revert that back to the fund. So if we could start with that item, I'd like to open up for discussion just to see what the sense of the council is on that particular item. If you want to start off, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I was concerned, Steve, because we had a pretty specific number there, the 144 is being used. And then your memo, I think, took it to a different, sphere, because there are items that are outstanding, what have you. So I'm curious, let's just say, for example, that the council decided year 2 is the end of this. When would we have an end? If we decided.
Right. The 144, I think, was as of March 1st.
Right.
And since then,
Right.
we've had 2 more warrants that have come through.
Right.
And one is, there's a package in the package is something showing you a little bit more.
But there's other stuff.
But there's other stuff,
out there.
yeah. You know what, I don't think we're gonna know probably for, we still have, I just approved a warrant today for another $6,500 on this. And I bet we still have 10 to 12 people out here for this season that are still waiting to get approval from the state. Because there's a
that's a
two-step.
max of 500, right? That's 500 times
500,
12.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a little bit more that I would expect to be coming in this year. To date, we've assisted 184 households.
And what's our current total based on the warrants you have done?
There is, we have awarded 168,202. I think the memo in this is 161. So that this is right off the press
144, the
today.
memo, yeah.
Yeah.
161, yep.
Right, so we're clearly going to be under,
Yes,
seems under 180.
it'll be under the 400, yeah.
Okay, we'll be under.
Well, I think you two were saying 2 different numbers. So yes, we'll be under the 400. I think there's no question about that.
Yeah.
But I think your question, Councilor McLean, is, what's our over-under on hitting that 180,000 that's in the memo? Steve, do we still feel like that's the right estimate, or?
Through this heating season? Yeah,
Correct,
I think
yeah.
we'll be in it's certainly in the 170s.
Okay.
So we'll be close, yeah.
So 180 is, I mean, obviously with some unknowns, 180 is the number we should be thinking about in terms of what we expect to spend through the end of this year. Okay, sorry,
There'll be
Councillor
some-
McLean,
there'll
I
be
just
some
wanted
that
to.
will come
No,
in.
that's
There'll
fine.
be
I'm
some
just-
that will come in late.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a little clarity because I remember Councilor Dombrowski had indicated maybe this would be, in his opinion, a 2-year program. I'm thinking in mine, it may be the same. And if that's the general feeling, then I'm just wondering what amount can be put back into the 1.828, if that's what the council decides.
Yeah, so I think, you know, for the purpose of our thinking, I think it's 200 to 220,000 is probably what we're thinking about. Just rough order of magnitude, knowing that there's some run out we'd have to work through. Councillor Smith Galvin?
So if we carried it into a third year, would the estimate, and I see Jason says here, I mean, he feels pretty confident that there will be a need for it.
Yeah.
You know, if we look at the past 2 years, and you're saying it comes in at 220, so another 110 or so. So it still leaves us a little under 400,000, but not completely. How does that fit into the obligated by December 2024?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, that's
That's a good
another,
question.
we're gonna have to ask, I think,
Yeah,
ourselves
we're
that question
very
for everything.
specific, yeah.
So,
For anything that's not,
Yeah.
I can't point to it, like a sidewalk or
I mean, I will say, just having just heard the presentation from the food bank, and I know that, you know, a lot of this work's been done kind of with the same audiences and the same need, and anything that can free up money so that people can not only be warm during the winter, but have food during the winter, I think it's a small price to pay, and I'd like to see it go into a third year.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? Councillor Dombrowski?
I'll just remind everyone that, I mean, these funds were really meant to be like targeted, like one-shot deals, infusions. And I think that the home heating program has served a valuable purpose. I supported it at the time that we allocated the dollars for it. And I think we've seen us get through, you know, 2 seasons now with it. I think it's time for us to migrate the 220,000 back into the pot, which puts us over, I think, just over $2 million in that case, I believe, right? From
It would be
allocation.
about 2 million and change.
Yeah,
Yep.
2 million and change. I think that, again, we can't create this ongoing operating, you know, line item that we can't sustain going forward. And there are also, fortunately, other programs at the state level as well. I mean, we're in essence matching state level programs, but for people in need that would benefit from the programs, they're out there. But I think that we never intended this program to be something that was going to be long-term. We can't have it be long-term. And I think it creates a certain financial dependency that is not fair for people's own budgeting purposes too. So I think that we close out the year and we transition the 220 and reallocate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions or comments? Councillor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair Chines. Steve, question for you. Jason has been pretty proactive in working with residents in terms of applying for the state programs as well. Do you have any idea of how many? I remember before the application process was pretty slow at the state level or the Commonwealth level. Has that
I think
been
that's gotten
rectified?
better, but that's still a lag. Well, let me put it this way, they don't turn around things as quick as we do.
So we have more people applying to the state level through Jason's
Yes.
efforts and helping them.
Yes.
But it's still difficult to get it
Right.
through the process.
Yeah.
And for them to get the monies that they need. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councillor Danahue?
I just wonder, because I think it's a worthwhile to help people in need, especially in light of what we saw from the food pantry. But it just seems like being in ARPA seems a little odd because it's going to end in 2024. Then what happens? So I wonder if we could move this out of ARPA and use reserve funds, use our reserves to keep the program going. Because I think saying it's going to end abruptly in 2024 is a little bit concerning, and that people are going to need it and are depending on it. So
I think it's an absolutely fabulous program for people. I think we all agree that
Mhm.
with that. If we were to use other funds, and you're talking town funds,
Yes.
okay, those would be appropriated via town meeting action. So it could be part of a budget or warrant article or what have you. Probably I'd say warrant article, because then you could roll it over from year to year and add to it that way, whereas a budget would flow back.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that's appropriate. I think it's more appropriate than being in ARPA funds. So I would say to take it out of ARPA funds and then get it on town warrant.
So just as context around ARPA, the reason that we had included this in ARPA was because we were seeing sort of skyrocketing fuel prices in a year because of the pandemic. And I think that was the impetus was that this was meant to really kind of help people through a shock. I think the discussion we're having is that shock 2 years or 3 years? And that's, the right conversation to have. But I think at least historically, that was why we put it in ARPA as opposed to kind of an operating expense for the town.
Yeah.
So I would actually
Councilor Dabrowski?
I would make a motion that we take 220,000 of what has been allocated and put it back into the general ARPA fund.
Second.
Can I make a friendly amendment that to say just up to 220,000 just in case we end up slightly over in terms of the run out for this year?
Of course.
Discussion on the motion on the table. I'll just make a comment. I mean, my inclination personally is to let this run over for another year. Looking at sort of the comments from Jason Stone, I am worried about the fact that we are seeing reductions in the dollars available through the LIHEAP program. We are seeing reductions in the dollars available from the Salvation Army. I worry about what that means for our residents. Now, I also recognize, though, that, we have a year's worth of funding left, right? And, the discussion we're having today is not about sort of a long-term budget fix. It's about, this relatively constrained pool of funding that we have. So it really becomes a question of, when do we rip the Band-Aid off? Do we do it after next season or do we do it after this season? My inclination would be to hold it for another year if we can, but again, that's a decision for the council. Councilor Smith Galvin.
I just want to say, I think your rip the Band-Aid off is a interesting analogy, and I think we're ripping the Band-Aid off of our most vulnerable populations.
Without question.
And I just really think that, another year and with, fair warning, and I was the one who said at the very beginning, I didn't love this without weatherization happening at the same time, because we're not doing anything to help the buildings where these people are living. But having said that, I think that I'm not willing to rip the Band-Aid off of the most vulnerable people in Wakefield yet, if we have the funding, and we do have the funding.
Thank you. Councilor Dennehy.
Councilor Butt has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. I was late. Can we just walk through the timeline of Councilor Dennehy's proposal? So if we were to do this at town meeting in the budget, we've missed this town budget.
Yeah, you could do it in November.
We could do it in November, and it would be part of the budget for.
It'd be an article.
It would be an article, but it would hit next winter.
Yes, it would be out of free cash and it could be used immediately.
Yeah.
Yes.
Councilor Dennehy.
I was just gonna say, I don't think this is ripping the Band-Aid off. We're just moving funding sources, I think, is what I think, is that it could be voted on at town meeting, at the fall town meeting, be in place for the next heating season. We're funding it this heating season. So, and I think that it gives us the opportunity then to have $200,000 additional to go towards our very, worthy lists of things in ARPA, but not, I don't think it's ripping the Band-Aid off. I don't think we're saying that we're going to cut heating assistance. We're just looking at it to sustain it long term. So that would be, I think it's very important, but I guess it's just the funding source and maintaining it long term.
Councilor Smith Galvin.
I'm fine with that if we want to take a vote now that this body will make that motion for November town meeting. It seems pretty far out and pretty uncertain to me at this point, that you and I aren't going to be here, right?
We can be town meeting.
We can do citizen warrants,
yes,
right?
we
But
can.
unless the, you
I
know,
would be happy
I'm
to do
voting
that.
against that unless, you know, this body tells me that they're going to move forward with a town meeting warrant in November.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair Chines. I will take the lead on putting a warrant article together for town meeting in November.
And I'll second your warrant.
Well, it's not a motion yet, so.
Right, I'm just saying.
But yeah,
You have support.
But I mean, here's the thing, right? You could do a citizen petition, but I like Ann's idea of us, like, this is, you know, Steve is underplaying it. We created this great program. Like this is a great program, and it's helping 177 of our most vulnerable people. And it's small money. It's really small money. So yeah, we can look at that for the November town meeting.
Councillor Dabrowski.
We really created a stopgap measure. This was intended to be, we thought we would go through the money in the first season because that was when the need was greatest. And we had talked about the idea at the time that this wasn't an operating line item. That was the whole point of it. It wasn't a recurring expense for us. There are many worthy items that we could direct our resources to. I don't doubt for a second that Jason Stone is able to, present a compelling argument. I also know that there are plenty of other organizations and departments within town that can also present really compelling arguments about why we need something or how we would benefit. The food pantry we've talked about, money's going to them. They can provide compelling arguments. That's just the reality of it. But this ARPA funding is really meant to be infusions, and we're talking about people that are hurting. There are a lot of business people that have still not recovered from 2020. Oh, yeah. When I go into businesses, I hear about it all the time. Mm-hmm. And they're mortgaging their houses, or they're having to deplete their savings just to try to keep the lights on in their own place. And they had obviously a difficult time with finding employees as well. And a lot of places just have not recovered, and they're hanging on by a thread. And they have financial realities too. These are not, for the most part, wealthy people. Certainly, these are people who are just trying to invest their life into their business. So, this was never intended to be a program that was going to be long term. I also think it's unfair to try to dictate to a body that will have two new members what should happen in the fall. I think that that's not appropriate. I respect the fact that Councilor Vincent had mentioned about having two members who have been involved with the ARPA process to date have a say in how we're directing these funds. But at some point after April, there are two new voices to this body, and I think, and that would represent potentially one half of a voting block that would vote for something yay or nay. When you think about it. So I don't think we should be predetermining what the next iteration of the town council should be doing many months from now. If it's a worthy cause, in people's minds and an important effort, then that'll happen either through this council or any citizen petition could do that. So I don't like the idea of strings attached. So we're telling before an election even happens what this body's next iteration is having to do. It doesn't feel right.
So maybe just to be clear from a process standpoint, so the motion on the table is specific to pulling the dollars back. If there's a sense of the council to do something else, that is a separate issue to talk about. I do also think, I don't think that we can actually, and I'm looking at Mr. Mayo and Mr. Mullen, I don't think that we can actually bind a future town council to a warrant article that doesn't exist yet, if I'm not mistaken.
You can't bind a future town meeting to act, but you could commit yourselves now to putting an article on the warrant.
Okay. Even though that article hasn't been written yet.
But you could change your mind at the next meeting, too.
Yeah.
So-
So I guess that's my point, right? Is that we can vote to say that we want this article on the warrant, but obviously until the warrant article is actually written and exists as a thing, I mean that a future council, which could be 5 of the 7 of us and 2 other people or anyone else, could choose to do something with that warrant article or not. Is my understanding.
Until the article is actually posted on a warrant, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay, so again, I just want to clarify that from a process standpoint, because I think they're obviously related issues, but not entirely the same issue. And Councilor Vincent, I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Chines. Correct me if I'm wrong about the town charter, but don't I, as an elected member, have the right to do a warrant article myself? And I don't need the consensus of the rest of the town council?
Yes.
And that's what I was advocating. I will take the lead as an elected representative to put a town warrant article together for the fall. That doesn't bind the rest of this town council. That's my individual decision as an elected member of this body. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Any further discussions on the motion? All right, seeing none, we will take a vote. So the motion is to return up to $220,000 from the allocated ARPA funds into the unallocated pool. All those in favor of the article, please.
Can I just interrupt? When we say up to, like with the intention of closing out this current heating
Correct,
season,
correct, yeah.
sorry,
So again, I think the intention is if we spend, $182,000, we don't want to create like a deficit.
But it's not meant to be like up to in that it's like, there's structure to be, you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like there's.
So I think what you're saying, it might be 222,000, or it might be
maybe
217.
But by saying up to, I don't want to make it seem like we're returning 17,000 because we're
Yeah.
keeping it open in perpetuity.
Yeah, so maybe for the clerk's benefit, so I think to clarify, the motion is to return the unspent funds allocated from this line item once we have run out the spending for this calendar year.
For this heating.
This season.
This
Yep.
current heating season, yes.
Yep. Sorry, if
Exactly.
the up to kind of confused it. I think that was the intention. I don't want to
No, and
end
I-
up with
yeah.
a gap that we would need to figure out how to fill in some way.
Yep.
Any other questions or clarifications on the motion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of the motion as presented? All those opposed? Motion carries 5-2. All right, so then I'd like to turn now to the future spending. So our budget, I use that term loosely. The amount to allocate is roughly I want to say, Steve, correct my math, roughly about 2.1 million or so.
2,048,000.
2,040,000.
That's
Yes,
adding in
thank
the
you.
200,000.
Adding in 220?
Yep.
So we have more.
Yep.
2,048,000.
All right.
You're right.
227.
So in that vein then, and this is an effort to try to organize our discussion, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the following ARPA initiatives. The Small Business Fund for $1 million, the Food Pantry for $40,000, renovations to the Senior Center for $400,000, sidewalk extensions for $250,000, pedestrian access to the lake for $150,000, and whatever the number is that gets us to our remaining amount for the Housing Trust.
So moved.
Second.
And if someone can do my math quickly, Steve.
Yeah, I know, we're gonna have to repeat that.
I know, looking at it.
Yeah, so basically, I think the motion is the first 6 items based on the scoring ranking. If the total that we have to spend is 2.04 million, I think that's 200,000 to the Housing Trust, if my math is right.
Are we going with $1 million? Because I know that on the downtown item, I rated that highly, but I didn't rate it at $1 million.
Yep.
You had indicated that 600,000 might be where you would be at. I mean, so are we closing out everything else? And if we are, I would just ask that the 2 members of the Gas and Light Commission who have bothered to show up and sit here for hours, would at least be allowed to be heard. If
So-
we're freezing out other items, if that's the goal here.
So the goal is to have a motion for the purpose of discussion, but that motion is up for discussion and certainly could be up for amendment. Again, the goal I think that I had here was to try to sort of focus the discussion so that we're not kind of taking things
I think I know what the goal is.
willy nilly.
I'm sorry, could you?
But
would
I don't
you-
agree that
Would you
that
mind
was
just
the goal.
repeating? So we have business, senior center, sidewalks.
Business,
pantry.
food pantry, senior center, and again, I'm just taking these in order of the points that were scored. So business fund 1 million, food pantry 40,000, senior center 400,000, sidewalk extensions 250,000, pet access to the lake 150,000, and housing trust. I think because we're slightly, if you look at kind of the run rate of cumulative dollars, I think the amount there is 200,000. Steve, if my math
Yep,
is right.
I'm gonna put it all in, yep.
And that gets us to basically approximately what we have left, give or take a little bit.
So I'm coming up with 1.69 plus the pet is 150, so.
Yep, so
is
that
it
puts us at 1.84.
Okay.
200,000 to the housing trust puts us at 2.04.
There's no mathematicians on the town council, so it'll take a minute.
Well, I'm not helping them at this one, Bob.
So it basically, that leaves us at 8,000 then on.
You can laugh,
allocated.
Steve, I'm not
Right.
laughing.
Perfect, okay.
And leave
Again, close enough for
Right.
government work.
Unpaid.
Unpaid government work, exactly. So we have a motion on the table, and again, the intent is to sort of spur some discussion in a slightly organized way. So I'm going to open it up for questions, comments, discussion. Councilor Vincent.
I have a few concerns with that approach. If bear with me for a minute, I'll start with the sidewalk. We allocated 1.1 million of the sidewalk already for ARPA funds. We've spent 776,000. That means $350,000 of that is left. But now we're looking to add another 250,000 for sidewalks when we still have 350,000 that hasn't been obligated yet. The second part is pedestrian access. That's a legal argument that I have. That's easements involved, probably, in all likelihood, to get that pedestrian access. I ponder how we would get easements done and all the legal entanglements with that by December 31st, 2024. I mean, would there be potential easement problems with trying to get pedestrian access on that side of the lake?
Potentially, yes.
And so I don't know how we get the easements done on that in order to get contractual obligations in order to satisfy the Department of Treasury's final rule, which says that you have to have contractual obligations. You have to obligate that money by December 31st, 2024. So I hate to get legal on here, but I think the legal arguments dealing with pedestrian access are very pertinent. And therefore, I don't know that that $150,000 could be done now because I don't see how we satisfy the obligation requirements by the end of the calendar year.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilor Dombrowski?
With respect to the senior center, the only caveat, and when I ranked it, I made note of this. I feel strongly that the senior center has tremendous opportunity for us to be a multi-generational space. I feel very strongly that it should not be office space, those floors. And so I would be supporting it with the expectation that we utilize it for all that we can. We need more space for our senior programming. We need more space, candidly, for our town programming. There's an awesome stage there, and so I just don't want to see that become an office creation project.
Can I ask a question on that senior center?
Sure.
Because I don't know, Councilor Dombrowski, if you did the tour. I can't recall.
Separately.
Separately, okay, because we were on the tour. My history of the senior center and the second floor is that last year I had brought up to the town administrator the possibility of doing senior housing on the second floor. That didn't seem to be going anywhere. My understanding was always, because a couple of years ago, you may recall, I got in a little bit of trouble when I brought something up about evicting the dentist from the second floor, the only rent-paying person in 5 Common, right? And what I was told at that time was that the health department was gonna go in there. That's why we had to evict the dentist. And it all worked out ultimately. Except that all of a sudden then, the second floor didn't work because there wasn't an elevator. Now, I think the building is handicapped accessible. We spent money over there. In FY '22, we spent $72,000 out of capital planning. FY '23, we spent another $10,000 for windows. Now all of a sudden the building has no value. Perhaps that is a place where those offices could be, if it was spiffed up and if it was renovated, could be placed. But what we heard on the tour was entirely different than what I believe your problem, potential problem with this plan, with no plans, okay, is, which is that we were told this is going to be office space. I had advocated that we put something in there relative to 800 square feet for the Friends of BB. I don't see that. We had a back of the envelope chicken scratch, basically, at 300,000. We've never had plans. We've never had any discussion about how much space we needed, who goes in there, what the design is. Now the costs have gone from 300 to 400, again, without any plans. No one has had any discussion about how many people work for Melrose X amount of days per week, how many people are working from home X amount of days per week. All of the world, including government, where I work, is being downsized, housed, and hoteled, right? But we are allegedly going to put all these offices in there without a plan and without any cost estimate. I mean, the whole thing just is mind-boggling to me. But I guarantee you that all of us heard was that this was going to be for office space. So if that's your problem, then I say you get it in writing.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Vincent?
I'm going to amend the motion.
Sure.
I'm going to amend it by removing the $250,000 for the sidewalk for the reasons I indicated a few moments ago. And I'm going to move the $150,000 from the pedestrian access. Instead, by removing those, I'm then going to add that $400,000 for the solar panels at the Galvin.
Was that 400?
250 is for the sidewalk and 150 is for the pedestrian access. If you remove those two, that's $400,000. And instead, I would put that $400,000 towards the next item on the list in terms of priority, which is the solar panels at the Galvin.
Second.
Great. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Dombrowski?
I'll turn to our subject matter expert on this, Councilor Smith Galvin. My understanding when we went through the series of various stretch code and all these other things was that it was supposed to open up a lot of opportunities for us from a grant perspective. Am I mistaken in my understanding of opportunities that would now exist?
There are opportunities, and I mean, Councilor McLean did a lot of research on it. There's very good return on this. I personally think that this is something that we could do outside of ARPA. You know, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of rebates. There are rebates from the light department. I mean, I think this is an excellent, excellent project, and I think it gets us to our, you know, hopefully our net zero goals, which I'm going to talk about at the next meeting. But I really do think that we can. I mean, imagine putting. I don't think it's 500,000 even. I mean, it ends up netting out to 150. Imagine dedicating that at the next town meeting, which we just talked about. And it pays back in 4.5 years. And then all the money that we save on electricity for the next 20 years, we earmark and put that into the capital planning going forward 20 years. So I would, you know, I think it's an excellent project. I'm not sure that we need to use these funds on it.
Can I give a little information on that?
Let me, before I get to that, did that answer the question that you intended to ask?
I think so, and coupled on that too, because I keep hearing that this will ultimately be a revenue generator. Wouldn't bonding it make more sense as well?
On
the solar panels, if we didn't have grants, for instance.
If we didn't have grants or we didn't have ARPA, then I would probably, I'd have to look at where the reserves were, and things like that, but probably bonding it because you could offset the cost of the bonds with the electrical payments, and then eventually, you know, it would be less of a hit to the reserves and to the tax.
We may even be
But
able
it
to use like
depends on what-
the PACE bonds.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
there are
depends on where
bonds
we
out
are.
there,
Yeah.
that are specific.
All this we may.
So,
May I please speak?
hang on. Did that answer
I'm
your
all set. I'm
question?
sorry. Yes, it
Okay,
did.
thank
Sorry.
you. Counselor McLean.
Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but I asked if my consultant could be here tonight to explain some of this to you folks. I was told by the chair that I could not bring him, but I can give you the high points of this. And I don't know that that was the proper thing for me to be told, but I wasn't going to file suit over it. So I'm simply going to tell you that the high points of this, and I don't understand from grants, and I have asked, okay, what grants? Show me the money, right? I can tell you what this would do. First of all, this is solar ready since 2005, okay, this building. That's important. And this council has done nothing for 9 years. That's a fact. In addition to that, it's ready, solar ready and waiting. And what this proposal says is if we invest roughly $500,000, and unlike some of the counselors, I started with $1 million, I brought my one request down to 500, my one request. And what happens is that, and it's a rule of thumb in the industry, and it may not be a solid 10 years, but once a roof starts to age, people don't want to do these projects anymore. Why? Think about it. Because the roof's getting older. So if this is going to be there for 25 years and you get a 25-year-old roof, you probably want to look someplace else. So it is time sensitive. This is also filling all of those requirements that the town administrator and town council are so worried about. Because we could have people on this roof this summer, according to Soltech. They have they're ready, willing, and able. They have the means. They would have to work out the power agreement with the gas and light. And we have two commissioners here today. One of them, who's the chair, sent us all an email today in support of this project. By the way, I did not solicit it. Soltech did not solicit it. What we do then with the 500, I hear about grant money. There's a 30% return that comes from my employer, that comes from the federal government. So not only do we get that, we own, because we own this solar property, we own the SRECs. Those are the solar RECs that have a market value that hopefully we would work out a nice arrangement with our gas and light company to provide them with what they like to get, which are those solar RECs, and they would hopefully pay us for them. So that's in addition to the 150, okay? So when you look at this over time, we also originally conservatively estimated 15 cents a kilowatt. Now this produces a little over 200 kilowatts DC. DC gets converted to AC by the inverters. This is a good sized project. And we had initially estimated 15 cents. We got the bills from Galvin. I asked for a bill. We got 3 months of bills from town administrator. It's actually a little over 17 cents. That is why, if you scroll down on that to the bottom, you see that the ultimate payback is $1 million. Now, it's based on assumptions, but they're reasonable assumptions. You could say, well, maybe Congress will reverse itself and we'll never get that 30%. I can tell you that I read an article last week in Tax Notes or Bloomberg, I forget which, hundreds of companies across this country are pre-registering for this right now. And 80% of that, some of it is making the wafers in Arizona, but 80% of it is energy related. And there was testimony in front of the Senate by the president of our largest Ohio manufacturer of solar products in favor of this. Companies are lining up for this. So I think it's a fairly safe bet if we get in there and we spend our money and we start getting our payback, that we will then be right in line early to get that 150 back. And we can use that then. We'll probably get that back before a lot of this other money we're talking about is even obligated or spent, I would hope. Now, I'm not saying how long the federal government's going to take. I'm not making any unreasonable promises here, Councilor Dombrowski. But this, I think, is a really good deal. It fits all the numbers. It's supported by the gas and light chair commissioner, who has looked at it and said it's a 4.5-year payback. How can you say it's a bad deal? So this actually creates real, these are prevailing wage jobs. This is creating jobs in our community. This is bringing energy, you know, similar to what you said. It's a great program. Now, yeah, we can wait. We can wait. We can wait till that roof ages. We can go for a town warrant some other time. We can do all that. But we have the money right now to put the skin in the game and get this project started. And it's still only half of the roof. I'd rather have $1 million and do the whole roof. But at, 500 or 400, we can get a good sized array up there and start paying ourselves money. And I think that's some of the best use of this ARPA funds that we can have.
Thank you, Councilor Vincent, and then we'll come back to you, Councilor
And
Smith
if I
Galvin.
could say one more thing. Our Green Community submission mentioned 2 buildings. The largest town buildings using energy are the high school, as we know, and we're gonna go, we're gonna go over there. 10% of that, the second building is Galvin. We haven't done anything with it yet. The submission in Green Community said, someday we might, we hope to, maybe we will. I'm saying we can do it right now. We can put these guys on the roof this summer. We can get this started.
All right, Councilor Benson.
I'll yield to Councilor Smith Galvin.
One thing is a clarification, but one is just, I think it's very unfair to say that this council's done nothing for 9 years, because this was really not feasible at these returns until a year ago when the IRA is. So that's just a clarification on the policy. The other thing is maybe more for Mr. Mullen. So this would be a $500,000 upfront, and then you're right, we would get 30% back, and there would be credits back.
In the SRECs.
And the SRECs, which I don't think, you want to talk to that, Tom? I'm not sure that that's.
So,
You
hang
have
on
to
just
come
a
to the
second. Can you come
microphone.
to the microphone if you're going to speak and make sure you introduce
There's
yourself?
not SRECs anymore, I don't think, in Massachusetts. And that RECs are renewable energy certificates, and they're separate from the power. They're another revenue stream that you get from power.
All right, Mr. Betcher.
Tom Betcher, 25 Wakefield Ave, Gas and Light Commissioner, just as clarification, not the chair this year. No, as if the RECs, as part of the MLD rebate program, the RECs are retained by Gas and Light and are retired as part of our portfolio. So they are not sold. There would be no revenue that comes from those RECs.
Okay. But that really wasn't my point, but thank you for clarifying that. So there's no additional SREC stream, which doesn't make this really any less kind of financially, but so there's not additional money on it. So if we put 500,000 in and end up getting 300,000 back, just for round numbers, is that count under under ARPA? Like, are you allowed to invest in something and then get rebated on that investment? I don't know. I mean, it would be something we have to look into. It just doesn't sound like, when everybody's explained ARPA to me, that is kind of what it feels like it's kind of playing with a little bit. And believe me, I love these solar panels, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to get caught there.
Any governmental purpose? And I don't think we'd get, you're saying if we get a revenue stream, is there a problem?
No, I'm saying if we put 500 down and we
revenue.
get 300 back
We should
on
get
January
We should get
1st.
150 back.
Okay,
30%,
150, if we
yeah.
get any of it back.
I say then we plow it back in.
But if,
Plow it back into ARPA.
so can we get a rebate using ARPA dollars is the
Yes, that's my-
question. And I think
that's
I
one of
was
my
thinking the same
questions.
thing as I was hearing this.
Okay, so I think, again, just to kind of get some more control, Mr. Mullen, do you want to add to that, or?
So the question is, if you take $500,000, for example, of ARPA funds, you invest it in something and you get, say, $300,000 back.
Let's say 150.
Whatever.
Whatever the number is.
You get X back. Can you say that your actual ARPA expenditure is 500 less X? Is that the question?
Yeah.
See, I don't think so. I mean, everything I've seen would suggest the ARPA expenditure would be 500,000, the gross amount of federal dollars thrown at a problem.
So the 150, if it was a rebate of 30%, which it is under the IRA, we would then have that money to use.
I think that would go into the general fund.
Any
Even better.
Any, well, but here's my question on that, maybe just to sort of pull that thread a little bit further. So wouldn't we then need to allocate basically dollars from a non-ARPA source to cover the rebate to pay for the work that then gets rebated? I guess, could we allocate the entire cost of this to ARPA? Given that we're not sort of the appropriating body for town funds outside of this pool of ARPA dollars that we have.
the entire cost being 500,000, for the sake of argument.
Yeah,
I think you could. I
we
think you
could,
would.
even though we're not
Yeah.
the appropriating body.
No, we are.
You are the
Only for the
appropriating body.
ARPA funds.
Only for the
Only
ARPA
for
funds,
ARPA.
right.
So, but I guess that's my question is then, would we not need to seek town meeting approval then for the other dollars that need to be spent to kind of seed the project?
Well, if you take this large amount of cash, 500,000, say, are you saying that you need additional funds in order to do this project?
Yeah, I don't
So
think you
if
do.
the ARPable, I'm creating a word here, but if the expense that can be kind of counted as ARPA is only sort of the 500,000 net of the rebate, and we have to obviously pay to kind of do the project up front, are we overstepping our bounds of what we as, you know, kind of the executive body of the town, not the legislative body, are we overstepping the bounds from sort of spending ARPA to spending tax levy dollars that we can't do without town meeting approval?
Well, I thought the point we just made was that the full 500,000 would be ARPA funds that would be applied to this purpose, and we'd get some money back, but that doesn't reduce the actual ARPA investment.
Okay, I guess then maybe I
I
misunderstood
think that's
that it did actually, I thought my question was, does that reduce sort of the ARPA investment, I guess is the
Because you're
we
basically
would-
taking 500,000 from the government and $150,000 from the government. I mean, you need to
Right.
kind of look at the
So
double
question
dipping
is,
on
would you
federal
get that?
grants.
Would there be, will the government say,
You've
know,
only
'cause sometimes
spent
this happens in
350,000.
grants, you
It
can't
happens
use
all the time in
grant
federal
on top of a
grants.
grant.
Right.
So would the government, I don't know, would they say you spent 500 in ARPA, so guess what, you're not gonna get back the credits?
I
don't
would
know.
just
I
want
don't know the
to
answer to that.
run that down.
And Councilor
Sorry.
Dabrowski.
I just feel like we can address this issue without ARPA funds and eliminate a lot of uncertainty without putting the project on ice. If it's, you know, I personally would like to have a presentation at some point. I'd like to understand from like a couple different vendors and like, because I've heard, you know, obviously plenty of positives, but I've also heard like some negatives in terms of like some panels that have histories of not functioning well, and like the life expectancy is not where it lands. So I just want to have a better understanding of it. You know, I don't know why this couldn't be handled as a standalone in short order without the ARPA, especially when you're saying if we are convinced it'll pay for itself in 4.5 years, whatever the case is, why would we not just be a little more deliberate about this and not get entangle this with ARPA?
I think it's simpler under ARPA than trying to do it, you know, through a later mechanism, you know, and then the question is, right now we have preferred vendor for the Commonwealth who's all ready to go. There's a timing aspect to this. I think their projection on the cost and the return is really good. I'm concerned that then if we get into, oh, okay, well, let's do an RFP, let's hire a private consultant that may cost us another $100,000, you know, and do this sometime in the future, that it won't get done. I'm more concerned that it won't get done through the mechanisms that you're tossing around. I think all the arguments of the uncertainties can go to just about everything we've got on the table tonight.
Thank you.
Uncertainties on committing money, spending money, you know, what happens if, you know, downtown you don't do enough, you know, you don't have a formal trust like we do with a housing trust. How's that work? Where's the money go? Does it get spent on time? I'm concerned that everything on our list could have these same doubts.
If I may just suggest on that point, though, if I think as we go on over the course of the year, if we get to a point where the monies aren't being expended, we can always reevaluate.
Absolutely.
And there's no question we can have other projects that could be shovel ready, arguably, right? As long as we, you know, say we check in I don't know, like August, for instance, and where are we? You know, if we're not going to be under contract, that still gives us time to be able to go to maybe some of these other projects that we haven't been able to
I
fund.
think that's right, and I think we've kind of beaten this piece of it to death, but I do think the expectation is similar to what we did tonight, right? We had a pool of money that we didn't spend the entire pool of. We made the decision to basically sort of put it back into the fund. That may be the case for any of these, and there is a sort of a reevaluation process. Discussion from others or comments from others on Councillor Vincent's motion. Councillor Dennehy?
I guess I don't, well, I'm very conflicted here because I guess I don't see the point of not putting this into ARPA. It just seems like it kind of makes sense because it could be done quickly, and I think that that's important. And why wait to apply for the grants and wait on that? But at the same time, I mean, can we vote on it contingent that it does count? That how do we find that out? If that is a actual ARPA expenditure that.
So I
it
think
does
if we
count.
vote on it tonight and it cannot go forward for some reason, that goes to the process that I think Councillor Dombrowski and I were
Okay.
just exchanging about, that would.
Okay, that's.
Again, if we do not spend something in ARPA, we need to make sure that we allocate whatever's left over to something else by 12/31.
And we
I
could
apologize,
find-
that
Yeah,
doesn't
no,
include you.
I get it, but, and we can
But
make
that,
that,
but
we
I
can
think
try
that
to
would be the
find the
case here
answer
for any
soon.
of these.
Yeah.
You know, if we, vote to allocate dollars to the senior center and
Right.
we don't end up spending it, or we spend less than 400,
Right.
whatever the case may be, there's then some additional allocation that we need to make. Councillor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair Chines. Yeah, like with the incubator fund, we'll have to set up a process by which that money gets allocated contractually by the end of the year. With the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, if that goes, what the Board of Trustees can do is put a process in place, like it's been done in Gloucester, we talked about Gloucester, where people can apply for renters assistance or closing costs of their housing. And if that process is in place and the Board of Trustees has decided that they want to obligate that money, then that would meet that requirement by the end of the year. Obviously, we're not building housing in town by December 31, 2024, so it would be used for these other purposes of renters assistance and helping with closing costs. I need help with math, though. How much was left over for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund when you guys were doing all the math over there?
200,000.
How much?
200,000.
200,000, and the solar requires 500,000?
If we do it as proposed, we'd have to get a rework, a smaller array.
All right, so there's 200,000 left for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, even though the request was 250,000. All right, so my motion then is going to be to remove the $250,000 for the sidewalk, remove the $150,000 for the pedestrian access, because we'll never get those easements done by the end of the year, and remove, and this is my project, and remove $100,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and reducing that to $100,000, and putting that $500,000 into the solar panels.
Second.
That's my motion.
Okay, so that is a modified motion for your
Well,
original
now I know the
motion.
math. I didn't know the math.
Okay, no problem. And Councillor McLean, you had seconded the original motion, you second the modification as
I did.
well? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Just to add my thoughts on this, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Dombrowski and Councillor Smith-Galvin. I love the idea of solar. I love the idea of doing the whole roof. I personally would do it as a bonded warrant article. I think it's cleaner, and I would, if we don't approve it through ARPA tonight, I would maybe request a motion tonight to instruct Mr. Mayo to pull together an article for the fall town meeting. I do think the time is important. But to me, this is something that I would support, if we had ARPA funds or not, right? This has a clear payback. It is a clear benefit to the town. It is a clear benefit to the environment. There is no reason not to do it. I think we're just trying to figure out what's the best bucket of funds to put it in. And as something that has a return on investment, I think that gives us some more options. I want to speak about the sidewalk extensions and the pet access to the lake, because I think these are both really important. On the sidewalk extensions, we do have some money left over, which is phenomenal, and I think it's a testament to our Public Works Department, our town engineer, that they've been able to stretch those dollars. We also know, because we now have an inventory of projects, that we have a lot of sidewalks to build. And there's some big sidewalk projects that we haven't touched that, quite frankly, can eat very quickly into 250,000 plus the 300,000 we have over. I think immediately of Forest Street as an example. I think that is a huge, huge issue from a pedestrian safety standpoint. And I can't imagine that we get out of any remediation of sidewalks on that area for anything less than $500,000. Obviously, we're going to pursue grant funding as well. But when it comes to improving our sidewalk infrastructure, I have no doubt that we can find good, high-quality projects very quickly to spend $250,000. On the pedestrian access to the lake, I think, Councilor Vincent, the points that you make about, discussing easements and that taking some time are good ones. And it may be that we don't spend $150,000 by the end of the year and that we then have this sort of money left over to reallocate to something else. I'm willing to take that chance because I think that this is an important project for us to pursue. We've expressed it as a priority of the council when we did our retreat last summer. It's certainly a priority for me. And I think it's a real quality of life issue for the community. And so I think it's worth a try here. Again, may mean that we don't get it done and we have to kind of repoint those dollars. We'll have an opportunity to do so, but I think we should try it. So I would respectfully oppose the motion. I think that, we have the opportunity to do all of these things in a couple of different ways and really create some real value for the town. So other questions or comments on the motion? Councilor Dennehy?
So I think you make some excellent points. The sidewalk expansion is something that I think is very important, but I think also in the pedestrian and bike plan is that we know that with the approval of that plan comes access to a lot of grant money. So I am hopeful that this is such a priority to the state that we would be able to get grants. So I guess we just all, it seems like we're all kind of in agreement that these are good ideas, but it's like, what is the funding source? So I think that it's something that's great that we will probably be very successful in getting grants.
Certainly, that's the hope. We would need to finish everything on the list, ARPA or not.
I know.
Councilor Dombrowski.
I realize that there's a motion now, but I do want to say that I do plan to make a motion that we get the business incubator approved. I would like to just do it as a standalone. I think it's an incredibly important piece to all of this. There's been a general consensus in terms of the value to it. That is money. Those are dollars that can be directed right away. We have programs in place that are in need of funding, so we can make that happen. And it would be transformative for our business community and our community as a whole. And I think that's a really important piece to this. And it's probably the most aligned priority of anything outside of public health that we've very thoroughly addressed. The economic recovery aspect of the pandemic, lest we forget, these dollars came as a result of how to help people and businesses recover from the devastation of the pandemic. So I say that because I'd like to, at minimum, get that locked in. I think we'll have pretty good agreement.
So we have that. That is part of the main motion. So we'll be coming back to that.
Yeah, but I know we're getting kind of sidetracked on some of these other things, but I would just like to get that locked in.
So is there anything that has not been said about Councilor Vincent's amendment to the main motion? Okay, so I'm going to move us along and call for a vote. All those in favor of the amendment as presented by Councilor Vincent? All those opposed? Motion fails by a vote of 3 to 4. So now we are back to the main motion. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Councilor Vincent?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair Chines.
What are we back to?
I just, from a legal standpoint, don't see any way that easements are done by the end of December 31st, 2024, and the other legal obligations in order to get the pedestrian access done in the next few months. So I would move to remove the pedestrian access from the motion. The $150,000 from the pedestrian access from the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
And can I ask Councilor Vincent, on your motion, are you proposing to reallocate that elsewhere?
Nope, because we'll have to have a discussion on that if this motion passes, and then we can decide which one of these other ones that we want to contribute the money towards.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Counselor McLean.
I recall, first of all, there's a big potential path around the lake, right? It's not just these two pieces. I recall talking to the town administrator probably last year, saying maybe we could reach out to a friendly landlord, out at Lakeside Office Park, and I don't think we ever did. We didn't really do anything on that. I think I'm curious as to whether there even is a possibility, not by the QYC, I haven't scoped out their property lately, but certainly over by the cemetery. When I go down the dirt path and I get to that end of the, what is it, beacon, that dumps right into the water, that fence is right up to the shoreline virtually. I don't know whether they own that land to the fence. One might assume that. So I guess we'd have to bust through their fence. We'd have to negotiate an easement. There are graves approaching that area, so I'm not sure. Have we even given any thought as to whether these, even assuming in the time frame we could get these easements and we could get them for this price, otherwise we got to come back, right? That's why I try to say, okay, 500, and I mean it, on my proposal. Is this even possible? And if possible, is it doable within that time frame?
We haven't
Have
surveyed
we even
it.
reached out?
We
to
haven't
anybody?
surveyed it, and I have not reached out to either private cemetery.
Right, and
I
that-
think there is land between the fence and the water. Or,
I'm just saying I'm not
Yeah.
seeing it. I've been
Yeah.
down there a number of times. I'm sure a number of us have. I'm just saying a lot of the projects that we're proposing tonight lack that element of specificity for me to be supporting.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Well, I think two things on that. One of them is if this can't happen, then we'll know.
Yep.
And the other piece is, I don't know, I think we could also be creative with this. I know what you're talking about, it is a tight area. Is there like a stretch where, and when I run along the Esplanade by BU, there are some like small boardwalks, for instance.
that's what you did.
You could do something like that, which would avoid the issue of the cemetery, because it would be, over the water, for instance. I'd be curious to check it out. It's not the best, like, the lake is beautiful. That section of it is not the most favorite section, when you're going for a walk. So I think it's worth checking out. Worst case, it's 150,000 that gets
We
put back into the
reallocate
pot
later.
to be reallocated, but the idea that, you could have a tangible project for, I think, small money, but significant impact, I think it's worth exploring.
But
And-
doesn't going over the water, Steve, create
Chapter 91.
brand new problems and potential issues? And
So
no one
again,
is-
this
yeah.
is,
Right.
I think, to the point, this is basically an invitation to explore, and if we don't spend it, we get another bite at the apple at it.
And I think we just have to have some sort of a timeline so that we know where we're at. And then if it's not feasible, then we have plenty to reallocate to.
And so my expectation, regardless of what we allocate tonight, my expectation is that we are still going to continue with at least quarterly updates
Oh, yeah,
in
absolutely.
terms of ARPA spending. So again, this is not an issue that's coming off our
Some things we might
agenda.
bring back earlier once we have. We will bring back earlier once we have something concrete.
Any other discussion on the motion? Counselor Danahy?
I just have a question for town council. What do you think the percent chance that we can do this by 2024?
When you say this,
Get the easement and to be able to successfully complete it?
so I think that for purposes of spending money by the end of calendar '24, what we are talking about is getting an order of taking passed by town meeting for the taking of an easement. And whether it's it's a formal taking or a friendly taking, whatever, but that would require that we do a survey so we know exactly what we're taking, we get a plan, and we get an appraisal. And then we pay the appraised, we get town meeting to vote to pay the appraised amount. Because you need that 2/3 vote in order to acquire the land. I don't think that the fact that it's ARPA money would allow us to circumvent that requirement. And if at that point we hadn't yet negotiated something that was friendly with an owner, that wouldn't prevent us from negotiating later and appropriating the difference in a settlement. And if we were unable to do that, we'd end up in court, but that's just part of the taking process.
So you're talking eminent domain.
Yeah.
Or easement.
That has not
Or
been
easement.
terribly popular in town.
Sorry, Councilor
No.
Vincent.
Thank you, Chair Chance. I mean, I think this is a great idea, but see, we're expending town money to do these things in order to assess whether this is good or not. So it's a good idea, but I don't know that I want to allocate $150,000 in ARPA money tonight towards this and then have to expend town money to do a survey and appraisal, the work that you would have to do on this project, when I just don't think the likelihood of it being done to meet the obligation by the end of the year would happen. And I think we can take that $150,000 and use it for one of these another ARPA project, or put more money into some of the ones that we're looking to approve tonight. I don't know. I just look at this from a legal standpoint, and from a cost benefit analysis, I just don't think it's something we should allocate now because of the time frame of having to get it done 8 months from now, a little over 8 months from now.
Yeah, I don't see why ARPA money couldn't be used for the purposes of the engineering and the appraisal.
Oh, good, okay.
All right, any further discussion on the motion on the table, the amendment on the table?
I'm just lost where we are now.
So this is Councilor Vincent's, nope, that's fine, Councilor Vincent's amendment to take out the $150,000 allocated to pedestrian access around the lake from the main
For
motion.
the main motion, your
So this
motion
is-
of 6.
Correct, yep, so
And
this
you-
is an amendment to that
To make
motion.
it 5.
Yep.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we will take a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion fails, vote of 2 to 5. All right, back to the main motion again of the 6. Any further discussion on that?
On the other,
On the entire main motion?
okay, what do we have left?
So the main motion is still as it was at the beginning, which is
Which I
$1 million.
have forgotten, I'm sorry.
Yep, $1 million to the Small Business Fund, $40,000 to the Food Pantry, $400,000 to the Senior Center, $250,000 for sidewalk extensions, $150,000 for pedestrian access to the lake, and $200,000 to the Housing Trust. And Councilor Smith Galvin, you had your hand up.
I was just going to start by talking about the incubator, which I think is a great idea. I know that we would have to figure out how to mobilize it, but I think you have the new economic development group that you're working with. I would really like to see it not just be small businesses, but also encompass nonprofits. I've always said here, that we have, I looked it up once, like Wakefield has hundreds of registered nonprofits on the charitable websites. And I think, I actually think some of them kind of struggle sometimes too, like so many boosters, don't quite know when to file their paperwork and all of that. So I think that there are ways to not only have the small businesses, but to also include the nonprofits. And with that caveat, I'm very much in favor of this.
It is in there.
And I think it was written in there, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so when when Councilor Danny and I worked on this, we kind of started this with the germ of the idea from Inspire, and then it said, well, what if we could do this for more entities, not just nonprofits, but businesses? And so it is intended to be inclusive.
I think it's creative, and I think it's exactly what ARPA is supposed to be doing.
Any further discussion on the main motion, Councilor Danahy?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of this, and I think it's one of the most important initiatives, and I think it's in the spirit of ARPA. It will be helping our community. It'll be something, I know that Councilor Dombrowski has been focused on downtown redevelopment for a very long time, and I think it really needs an infusion of something to happen quickly. So I'm in favor of the full of the funding for this, because I think it's really something that is greatly needed.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilor Dombrowski.
When I sat down with our economic and community development director, and I prepared a memo that I sent to Steve on this, and I went through a lot of the bullet points we have here. And it was really interesting to me as you get thinking about all the ways in which, again, from a facade improvement to a sign to the pop-ups to the ADA compliance to the not-for-profits to the grants to the matchings. I mean, there are just so many different ways. And then I spent a lot of time with John Smolinski too of the chamber, who was also talking about these programs that he had, in place that he just needed more funding, and there were the need was significant. So I laid it out for town administrator in my memo that goes into that detail, because I think it's such an important thing that we are doing, and it just fits so squarely in the purpose, like of what ARPA was intended for, from my perspective. And I also, in doing some research on this too, I learned that the phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats" actually goes back to the 1960s, and it was a slogan sourced to the New England Council, and that was actually a chamber of commerce, and the concept was premised on the idea that when you have an improved economy benefits all participants, and economic policy, particularly government economic policy, should therefore focus on broad economic efforts. And I think this does that in a lot of different ways. And so while we have a microeconomy in Wakefield, we really are infusing like something meaningful into that is going to benefit our residents directly.
Thank you. Anyone who has not spoken on the main motion? Councilor McLean?
So the main motion is those 5 items, right?
The 6.
The 6, okay. I would say on the small business incubator, I'm supportive of it, but I think that $1 million is too much. I think that it could be cut in half and still do significant good downtown. I've spoken with, the state rep about, how they did this in Melrose. There's a lot of good stuff that happened with facades, et cetera, in Melrose, and there was a lot of grant money. So it seems to me that we should be doing more to not fund this out of ARPA, but to be getting the grants to try to do what they've done in other towns. Relative to the senior center, I just have to reiterate, it's $400,000 with no plans. So if you want to put a proviso in there, Councilor Dombrowski, I think you should, because otherwise I think the Friends of BB get no space. I would want them to have 800 square feet in that building. And in fact, I think I'll make a motion to amend that 800 square foot in the senior center be allocated to the Friends of BB, and that they be given reasonable access to the building.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the amendment? Excuse me. Councilor Dombrowski?
I would like to keep our options open with the senior center at this point. I don't feel comfortable making a commitment of space. The only thing I do feel comfortable with is saying that it should not be used for offices, because I think that's too precious a space to be used for offices.
Is that part of the motion then?
Well, no, you've made the motion.
You've made the
Well,
motion.
right, obviously,
yeah.
yeah, we can vote on that and it'll get voted down, but I'm curious about whether you're gonna.
I will do that as a
We'll do
separate
that,
motion,
yeah.
yes.
All right. Any further discussion on Mr. McLean's amendment? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Motion fails 2-5. All right. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion?
So if I can just make a motion that with respect to the 400,000 for the senior center, that those funds not be used to create new office space within the facility.
Second.
Can I maybe propose or suggest a friendly amendment to that? I don't know that I'd want to say it would create no office space, because there may be a need for some office space, and I think that's something we need to discuss. I think if I'm understanding the spirit of the motion is we want to make sure that we have public space. For example, I think we've talked about, the auditorium on the top floor is like a premier public amenity. Is the intention to make sure that we protect something like that in other space versus a blanket prohibition on office space?
I don't want to see any departments moving into that space. So I would say that if the senior center decides they needed an office for something or whatever the case is, or there's some small office to be carved out, I don't have issue with that. But the idea of moving a department into that building, I take issue with.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Danahy?
Yeah, I think that in the spirit of ARPA is that I look at the senior center renovations is something that can benefit our senior community and create more vibrant space. But I am not in favor of ARPA funds for office build out or moving offices because I don't think that that's a direct benefit to our community. So I would say that it's not used to create offices, but I get being able to put an office in something that is not creating offices outside of. I would just say no offices. I think that's the clearest way. Is that not we would not want senior center renovations would exclude office.
Further
Office build-out.
discussion? I'll just make a comment on this one. As we think about some of the things that could be there, we've talked about, for example, having the social worker have an office there. That benefits our seniors. I could see having, kind of the office space for the rec department center there as a way of promoting more intergenerational programming. I certainly understand, I think, the sentiment behind it because we want this to be an active building for people to use. And rows and rows of cubicles don't suggest that. I agree with that, but I would like to see. I guess I would like to see sort of more of a plan and have more discussion about that as we go through. I think the money to be spent on renovation, quite frankly, regardless of what we do, is the right thing to do because it is space that is inactive, that is just wasted space right now. And $400,000 to activate that space to me is small dollars. I would just like to give us a little bit of flexibility to think about a variety of uses that make sense in that space.
May I just then maybe amend? I would just say that my amendment is just that with respect to the senior center, we don't have an office build out. And let's face it, any plans need to come before us anyway, right? So I mean, I'm not trying to be overly prescriptive here. I'm just saying like I think it's very clear the intention is not to have a bunch of offices in this space. The intention is to have a lively space that's publicly accessible, that enhances the resident experience. So whatever that looks like, but not an office build out. So the spirit of what we.
Yeah, so I think that's more amenable to what I'd like to see. Again, I don't want to create a prescriptive, no office ever anywhere.
Maybe the veteran service officer will end up having an office, relocating an office because the basement is not the place for him. But I don't know. Again, but yes, I think it gives us the flexibility we want. But the intention is very clear. We're not building a bunch of. We're not creating this space into a bunch of offices. That's all right.
Fair enough. I think for my comment, I think that satisfies it. All right, further discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. Finally, back to the main motion. Any comments that have not been said on the main motion? All right, seeing none, we'll take a vote on the main
Can
motion.
I ask for some clarification? I'm sorry.
No, we're so
No,
close,
you're so
Dave.
close. For the money for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yes.
I know the figure 200,000 has been bantied around. It might be 201, 202. Was the intent that whatever was left over?
I think the
in that
intent is
area?
whatever's
I just want to make
left,
sure
yeah.
that, is that understood, Bob? Okay.
That's fine.
Yep, and again, I'm sure we will have to tweak some
Right.
things as we get further in here.
I will ask you for an exact accounting, don't worry.
And he will give it to us. All right, so the main motion for everyone kind of paying attention, and thank you, by the way, for kind of bearing with us through this. This is a lot, but I think this is an important discussion. The motion is to approve the following ARPA expenditures: $1 million to the Small Business Incubation Fund, $40,000 to the food pantry, $400,000 to renovations to the senior center, not to include office space build out, $250,000 for sidewalk extensions, $150,000 for pedestrian access to the lake, and $200,000 or whatever is remaining to the Affordable Housing Trust. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. I am going to ask for a further motion to close this out to instruct Mr. Mayo to put together a warrant article for the fall town meeting with regard to solar panels for the Galvin Middle School roof. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 6-1. All right, thank you very much. We will move quickly to the rest of it. Item number 8A, licenses. Do we have a motion for a one-day liquors license for the event at the library on April 27th?
So moved.
Seconded.
That's Blossoms, by the way.
It is
By
Blossoms.
the way, the last vote, you didn't give me as a negative, did you?
I'm sorry?
No,
The last vote?
Ed was
Ed was the negative. for the
Ed
last
was the
vote.
negative, okay.
And really Sherry's the one who keeps track.
No, I just missed it. I kept raising my hand. and
No worries.
It's almost 11, and I'm the oldest person on the council.
And I'm not opposed to it, I just don't think we should be doing it like now for fall.
I got you.
Yeah,
But again, we'll have to vote on it when it comes.
I
back to
understand,
us.
yeah, I get it. It's just so we're clear on that.
Yep. All right, the motion on the table is to approve the one-day liquor license for Blossoms at the BB. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next item is to approve a livery license for A-Class Limousine. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Just a question on this, Mr. Mayo. I don't know that I have ever seen us approve a livery license in my 5 years on the council.
Some of the limo companies actually, I think their insurers make sure they get them. So you'll see them every now and then. Yeah.
All right. Any,
That's my explanation.
that's fine. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I will take a motion for item 8C to approve a common victualler license for AA Sumo Incorporated.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 9, do we have a motion for approval of the Town Council Executive Meeting minutes, on March 11th, 2024?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Okay. Motion carries 6-0-1 with Councillor Danahy abstaining. We'll take a motion to approve the minutes, Town Council meeting minutes of March 11th, 2024.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favor? I'm sorry. Discussion. No. All those in favor? Opposed?
Too late for discussion.
Motion carries 7-0. Any announcements? I will just say there are a ton of great activities going on. I encourage people to check out the town website and the community calendar. There's a great intergenerational event coming up. The library is looking for feedback to their strategic plans, so encourage folks, we won't go through all of that, but please check all of that out and figure out how to get involved. Mr. Mayo, any further announcements on your
Nope,
end?
I have none, thank you.
Item 11, any matters not anticipated? All right. Seeing none, our next meeting is going to be Monday, April 8th. I talked to Mr. Mayo. We may start earlier than 7 just because we do have a number of budgets that we've got to get through. And, you know, it's 5 minutes of 11 and we don't want to repeat that if we can avoid it. So just a heads up for that. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much to all my colleagues on the council. This is a long meeting, but an important one. And thank you very much, Wakefield, for bearing with us for the evening. Have a great night.